All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have Allison McDowell here. And I just wanted everyone to know a little bit about why I'm excited. And that is because I've met only a few people like Allison in this journey, which is my life, who have seemingly figured out the meta context for really what is being architected all around us under, if you will, the, COVID response sort of notion. And I started to read your work, Allison, it was actually the fourth Industrial Revolution video series that my wife, Kelly, brought to my attention. And it just blew my mind and opened up so much context. And so I was so excited to reach out to you. Thankfully, you responded. And you've been working on really just helping to bring people, if you will, this is a metaphor that's overused, the red pill, but with your incredible heart-centered, energy. That's the part that excites me, because Kelly and I go deep down the rabbit hole ourselves, and oftentimes it's so toxic, and you just don't, right? You just don't know what you're doing, because if you share it and people aren't ready, they can really get upset and traumatized. And with you, your energy to me is such a great embodiment of what I know Kelly and I are working towards, which is to bring people awareness, but then not freak them out, and also deliver them some promise and some, model for how to engage the information positively. So I'm so excited to have you. Today, we are going to be covering a number of topics, and I think the viewers will very soon see that the best thing to do is just sit back, let Allison take the wheel. Occasionally, I'll ask a few questions, maybe to connect it to our audience. But Allison, I'm just so happy to have you, and I just want you to take the floor here, take over.
Oh, well, I'm really grateful. Just by way of background, I'm based in Philadelphia in the United States, and I actually got into this. My background, my training is in art history and actually historic preservation. So I think I have a skill set of doing primary source research and then knitting things together and looking sort of symbolically at things going below the surface of what's actually happening and then connecting it together. So that's the skill that I bring. I think in some ways I'm really appreciative to have to be invited today, because I know that you have a very large listenership and readership, and this is information people need to know, because it's very deceptive, the ideals that are being advanced as being built around justice and equity. And my lens is coming more from, I say I was a recovering liberal and now maybe recovering leftist. At this point, I'm sort of politically homeless, because all the things I thought like that everyone would be with me at this point aren't. So I'm really just out. People sort of talk about me like I'm a scout, like out on the horizon, like I'm going out to sort of tell people what is out there and to give them information. So it's overwhelming, I will say, and I talk fast and I apologize and have a lot of material. So those are all of my personal foibles. So just bear with me, know that we are all human and we all have things we're good at and things we're less good at. But this will be recorded, I'm sure. I will share the slides, and it's almost like learning a new language. And a lot of it has to do with financial structures and derivatives products, which are not easy to understand. Most people do not understand them unless they're in that industry. And some of it won't seem to make sense. But I would encourage you, I have my own YouTube channel, just Allison McDowell YouTube. It's really a basic little channel, but I have a whole series of playlists with other interviews. So if you're interested, you can go there and just really, I've had people tell me like they go to sleep listening to these podcasts, which is really kind of funny to think about, but it takes some time. So give yourself some time and realize like it'll take a few listenings to get there. So again, I'm here, I'm in this city. It's a predominantly Black city. It's a very poor city. And we are a target of a lot of this social impact investing that I'm going to talk about, because we are surrounded by very affluent area, Pennsylvania, the main line. And a large character in this sort of unfolding saga is the University of Pennsylvania and Wharton Business School. Not exclusively, but they play a major role, and that is here in Philadelphia. So there are things that I have researched, and I came into this through advocating for public schools against school closures, and realized that it wasn't just about using data to privatize schools and to take profit off of children in schools, that it was something much larger. It was part of these larger derivatives games that were going to be set up. And that it wasn't just education, it was essentially every single public benefit service would be privatized and subjected to these investment markets. And that includes health and wellness. So health meaning, physical health, but also mental health and addiction treatment. So these are all things that I'm going to try to bring to today. I haven't had a chance to really speak to that a lot up till now, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, so for those who are sort of new to this concept around, let's say first, the weaponization of public health, I know that my focus, as well as Kelly's, has been on helping people understand that when it comes to germ theory, for example, it's really been weaponized and wielded as a geopolitical instrument. And there are all these reasons why we can see this is happening. You can call it biopolitics, a way of controlling, the masses. And we can also look at it from the lens of profit. But what the piece that you have brought to the table that's so powerful is understanding, again, the datification, commodification of humans and human behavior, and how that works with these social impact investments, and then how it gears into sort of the AI world that's descending on us. So I just wanted people to understand that there's a really key missing piece here that you're bringing to the table, that while at times it's like a lot of data and it sounds really obscure, just hold tight, because I think it'll start making sense, especially when Allison does the presentation.
Yeah. And I will just say too, if people have not seen the film, The Big Short, which is a film that sort of outlines how the last global economic crash happened with the real estate and the mortgages and these asset-backed securities, that is a really helpful, because it's a very educational movie on how that all happened, and to understand the culture of these trading houses and how it works. So, understanding just in the framework that the next Big Short futures market isn't just toxic bundled mortgages, but is actually going to be debt, public benefit debt tied to human beings and children. And so it is, I think, it very much, we are in this moment of like sacred and profane is sort of how I'm framing it is. And I do feel that it is a spiritual engagement. And, I'm sort of a conduit for a lot of information. I'm not, I'm benefiting from amazing teachings from many people, both spiritual teachings and guidance. And also, I will credit largely, just upfront, I want to mention Joseph Gonzalez, who is the first person I ever met in the weird interweb world who understood the implications of a blockchain smart contract in financial investments. So he's spent 30 years career in AI and gaming and blockchain. And so we've collaborated a lot, and we have a whole webinar on that. So
that's another piece that I'm excited to have you speak to throughout this presentation, because there's so much exuberance around the blockchain and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and the dark side of that, I think you're really bringing to the foreground. Why has institutional money now shifted the narrative where now it's all investing in this sector? And there's a shadow to that I know you've helped to bring to light. And then as far as the spiritual aspects of this conversation, what I've been noting is almost like an ontological speciation event, where we're going from those who are aligned and who've been allowed themselves to be captured by this digitalization of life in general, and those who know that nature and plugging into the rhythms of the body, it's so essential that we stay plugged in, especially while we navigate this global web that you're about to expose, because otherwise we can spin out and lose our center and become like the monster we are fighting, as Nietzsche used to say.
Exactly. And my other framing that is somewhat unique, I think, I'm hoping will catch on, but I'm in Philadelphia, and so we're the home of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And I I appreciate the resistance efforts to these lockdowns and this controlled global demolition of the economy, and all the work that is being done in that sphere. I will say much of it is being framed around relying on these instruments, the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, sort of a patriot narrative. And I would just say there are quite a few in Philadelphia who've tried to surface some of the issues around the Constitution that it was never inclusive of all people. And particularly what we're coming up against, I believe, is more digital enslavement. And in many respects, people being pushed out of their economic independence into a dependency on the state, which is very similar to what our nation did to indigenous peoples, right? We removed them from land and we made them dependent on the government. And then the government did not fulfill its obligations to its people. And so in that context, I just want to sort of frame that is what I bring to this, is that questioning some of these underlying fundamental narratives, because I think in order to fully grasp that what is happening isn't an aberration, but actually a logical extension of where we started. But that there is a moment of redemption. Like there is this moment, like we are in this breaking down of everything. In my heart, I feel like maybe there's the chance that Philadelphia gets a do-over. Like maybe there's a chance that we could authentically make a world that is right and caring for the sovereignty of all human beings and all children. And so anyway.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, what I find so compelling about this sort of conversation is that, it's like that phrase about a text without a context as a pretext. And it's the historicity that you're bringing to the forefront. Some might call it karma, right? Cause and effect over many generations. I understand that to mean is once we learn the lesson, right, then we are able to graduate and be redeemed. And so that's what I feel is so powerful about what you've brought, Allison, to this conversation, is that meta context that honestly I have not heard anyone else speak to out there. I know there are others, but you're really the one so far for me.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I'm bringing these messages. I would encourage too, and maybe we can drop a link in the talk later, but there's actually a very formative speech by a professor at UC Santa Barbara. His name is Justin Leroy, and it's about social impact bonds. And it's, I think, race, finance, and the afterlife of slavery. And it is very much about the financialization of the slave trade, particularly the domestic slave trade. And, sometimes I actually even imagine that, like, maybe the people at Wharton, are they looking at early 19th century, like, financial transactions in, human bodies to set up this new system. So, again, I'm bringing forth the teachings that I've benefited from many other people and hoping that it resonates with folks.
Yeah, now, whether we like it or not, everyone has tasted what it feels like to be enslaved or imprisoned in this, quote, pandemic. So what you're speaking to isn't academic. I mean, we're all now experiencing the digital prison, as you've also described it.
Exactly. So let me see. Do you want me to bring up can you bring up the slides, or do I bring up the slides?
I can add it right now. Here we go. Cool.
All right. So anyway, so I call this performing wellness. Because what I really want to talk about a little bit is about both the financial structures that are being embedded in the Medicaid and Medicare systems and the healthcare systems that is going to be framed as preventative health. But the preventative health, and I know that you guys are very familiar with, like, the terrain theory. They're not going to clean up the world to make it healthy so we can live in it. They're going to continue to poison the world and make us operate in this sort of poison, toxic, dangerous world. And then they're going to bet on our performance in that. So let me... And
then they're going to blame a, quote, viral particle for all of those conditions.
Right. It's amazing to have an invisible enemy, right, that you've made up in an equation, in computing. So I just for framing this, I threw this out last night because I was working on my slides up. I was up really late and then up early. And, I was just trying to figure out, are we already my friend Joseph already talks about, we're in the game. And I'm like, is AI in charge? Like general artificial intelligence? Like, is this the cosmos? Is it AI? Like, who is running this? Because I've, continually have interesting things happen to me and come across the paths of people who are helping me on my journey. And it's interesting to sort of debate the mechanistic aspect versus the natural energetic aspect. But this is someone's response to my tweet asking about that. And they said, maybe it's like this crazy Hollywood B movie with all of these paths. It's like those books, I don't know, I had them in middle school that were choose your own adventure. You need to read and then you'd flip and they'd say, if you want to do this, go to page 77. If you want to do that, go to page 102. And you'd flip. And so, there were all of these different optional endings. So even though what I'm putting forth seems very it seems like they have all the cards. I really don't think they have all the cards. And I do believe that in my heart that the creator of the world would not want us to all be wiped off the planet and turned into batteries for a matrix of an AI. I don't believe that ultimately that is how it will go. And if you haven't read, I try to read it once a year, but A Wrinkle in Time is a book that I read. It's a children's book. And it's kind of complicated because it actually talks about sort of quantum physics and space. And ultimately that in the end, they are prevailing over technocracy. And the evil force is called IT. And what prevails over IT is love. It is a love of a girl for her brother. And that is what overcomes what seems like the impossible. And so I have a one of my friends and advisors, but he promises that there is an amazing gathering in the Valley of Love after the zombie apocalypse. So I'm kind of going with that maybe it's all fixed out there somewhere already. And we're just sort of going through these different quantum, dimensions along the way and doing our crazy, terrible Hollywood B movie version. And we will get there. But that's sort of my intro framing. And then also one of the other people that I draw on a lot is who I believe is really a prophetic voice for this moment is John Trudell, and also his wife, Tina, who was murdered in a house fire with her children. And I think in many respects, the Indigenous worldview has always been a direct threat and confrontation to this mechanized so-called Enlightenment scientist version of the world. And John Trudell has amazing speeches, but one of the things that most resonates is that he says that we have a responsibility to use the intelligence given to us by the creator to go up against this machine of technologic. And we're not the first. Other people have put themselves up against this machine of technologic. He puts a hyphen, technologic, but that we have to be thinkers, that we can't just sit back and believe, because believing is passive and thinking is active. And so I do feel like those of us who can see what is unfolding right now, that we should take that into our hearts. And even, though these challenges can really get us down, to know that we're doing this important work. Like if we can see it, that we are here to do this important work.
If I could add to, the thing about the binary sort of cortex, it's totally perfectly complementary and capturable by the technocratic system, but the heart, as you're speaking to, is not, and it is infinitely more intelligent, can grasp infinitely more. So that's where I really love what you're saying, and just would remind people out there that that's really the answer to how we overcome this. It's not going to make sense up here, but it will in the heart.
I think so. And I think, well, I'll talk a little bit more about like energetic and electrical systems later on, because I do think, and I'm learning more. I've learned so much during this process, but that energy flows is very central to all of what's coming, well, all of what has happened in the past and all of what's sort of flowing forward. So this is actually, I would encourage, and maybe we can include this link as well. This is from my education world. But when I was doing research around education and education technology, there was a rabbit hole, and it was called an entity called Global Education Futures Forum. And the head of this, his name was Pavel Leksha. He was based out of Skolkovo, which is in like the Silicon Valley of Russia. And he's a transhumanist. And so they had developed with individuals from all over the world, very influential. The one for the United States, his name was Tom Vander Ark, and he had formerly worked for the Gates Foundation. And they created a lot of infographics sort of anticipating what education would be like moving forward. And so this is just a screenshot that clips out a piece of one of these maps. But you can see, I've circled this new models of human capital investment. So that is an indication of these new human capital bonds that have really been in the works somewhat since the mid 1990s. But now that the technology with the blockchain identity and the 5G, it's ready to come on at scale. But you can see even above, there's like this prenatal university like prenatal education. And I want to emphasize that so much of this that is coming is based in genomics and bioinformatics, but it is steeped in eugenics. Okay, it is steeped in this idea of controlling people's lives based on their DNA, and the sense that you can engineer someone to be an optimum human. That is something that these individuals with all of this demented power feel like that they have the right to do that to people, either through digital technologies or potentially nanotechnologies and bioengineering. So the framework of both enslavement and indigenous erasure is really important. So again, I had mentioned earlier about the Indian reservations, and actually this is another piece. I'm in Pennsylvania, so Carlisle residential school, which was essentially these schools where they took children, is right here. I actually took my family there, but it's still on the grounds of the Army War College, right? So this war against Indigenous people continues to be waged, and it has this long legacy. And so I know a lot of us are talking under lockdown about concerns about food security, right? Controlling the food source. And that was one way in which the government, like when they put people onto these reservations, made promises about annuity payments that they could eat. And then they would deny them and withhold them. And this is an individual who had said, that they can just eat grass, that the Lakota can eat grass. And what ensued after that was actually the Dakota, they called it the Dakota Wars. And as a result, actually on this date, and this is why it's so significant, like there are these synchronicities, right? Wow. On this date in 1862 was the largest mass execution that was carried out in Mankato of the Dakota, who had defended themselves and their families from being trapped on these reservations, on these concentration camps, essentially, by the US government. And that was authorized by Lincoln. So when we understand this history, that's why I'm sort of trying to surface this, is that we are doing this work now, not just in the effort to protect ourselves and our families and our communities and future generations from the prospect of potentially being fundamentally shifted into transhumanism or synthetic biology but that we're actually doing this work for the ancestors, right? For those who went before who did not get justice. And that's what I try to bring.
And if I could just add real quick, Allison, is that we reported recently on the CDC having a page on their site that talks about confinement centers called green zones that would be set up for high risk COVID populations. And, arguably that wouldn't just be for those who are elderly or, minorities, but who haven't taken, say, for example, the mRNA vaccine or haven't subjected themselves to these tests that don't actually work. So, it's not like there isn't a parallel occurring now because perhaps we've never addressed our history, as you're saying. So just
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a political economy built on empire, right? It was our domestic empire through various broken treaties, fraudulent, of acquiring the land to roll out this nation, right? And to the detriment of those individuals. There was an economic reason behind it. Now we are seeing an economic reason that the billionaires are looking to build a world of fourth industrial revolution that's run pretty much by themselves and their robots, so that they can have a resort of the world with very few people. And so there's not a need for people on the land anymore to be doing labor, to be doing industrial manufacturing, to be being teachers and doctors. They're going to put most of that online, and they don't care if a lot of people die as a result. And that connects into Agenda 21 and the removal of people off of land into sort of mega city regions. Mm-hmm. So, it is very consistent with what's playing out. And I just want to say, like, this visual for me, I spent some time in South Dakota on Lakota land this summer, and I was seeing spider webs all the time. There were these amazing, I spent some time trying to work on making a garden there. And one of my first days I was clearing, they had plowed or cut the grass, and we were creating beds. And I left my glasses, and there was some trash that had blown in because it's very, very windy there, and it doesn't go away. So it gets caught under the sagebrush. And so I was picking up sort of trash after the grass had gotten mown, and I didn't have my glasses on, and I reached down in the grass, and I thought it was something like a Brillo pad or some fluff, like a cushion fluff or something like that. And I realized it was like a bazillion tiny baby spiders there in the grass. And like all throughout that, I would water in the dusk, and it was all of these little ground spiders. So, you know, for me, it's a lot of it is how do you talk? They talk in symbols, right? They use symbolic language, they use symbolic visuals. And I want to use these two images to sort of convey through the course of my talk, the people who would like to bet on our lives and control us and put us in little confinement so that AI can learn how we operate and learn us and limit our lives, restrict it into these tiny little spheres, like we're all, you know, sitting in our little rooms. That is this crazy pathway. I think it's somewhere in Spain. It's like the world's most dangerous path. And they'd like to keep us isolated and keep us on the pathway. Now, they can maybe say we can go fast or slow on their pathway, but it's their pathway and we can't get off. That is the version of the world that they're trying to impose with blockchain identity. And what I'm saying is that there's a beautiful like universe, natural universe of represented by the spider web, an interconnection of different paths and the ways in which spiders actually also consume their webs and then respin. And so to me, in my mind, that if we're aspiring, like keeping in mind an aspirational goal, it is more towards the interconnected spider web of our lives connected with others, having multiple paths and multiple options and multiple redos, right? Because we're all human and we're going to fail, and we shouldn't be stuck on a path of that sort. That's where they want us. That's where the AI wants us. So in January, I actually went down to Dallas and Tulsa to give a talk to some friends about blockchain education. And my friend Lynn, who's wonderful, and we were in the car on the highway in Dallas, and I'm like, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to tell people what this is like. And I said, the best I can imagine it is, I said, imagine like we're in a mixed reality video game, right? Like a Pokemon Go, right? So it's like a video game, but it's also Pokemon Go. It's in the real world. And it was set up by these, you know, business people, the Ivy League, because we're supposed to respect them because they have fancy degrees. And these Ivy League MBAs, they've put up the money for this game. But it was actually built by state surveillance interests and defense contractors, because much of the gaming and simulations world come out of defense contracting in Hollywood, right? So that's the PSYOP piece. So they're like, we can brainwash you. We have really sophisticated technology. We're going to put you in our game. And then that game runs to make money for these hedge funds, which are not, that is not money that benefits people. That is money that concentrates wealth and power in the top tiniest percent and then leaves everyone else dispossessed. And so they're going to put us on in the game, and then they're going to place their bets on if we will perform the right behaviors. And those behaviors are going to be aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, of which health is number 3. So good health, that is one of the behaviors, that's goal 3. And then as we play the game, we will be given this digital script. That's the digital cash wallets. And the corporate state. So this is the state, but it really is fascist. This is your government run by Google and Goldman Sachs. So they will give you script if you behave in their maze, and that the people who are managing this maze are the nonprofit entities and also the faith communities, because many of these powerful faith communities also have large pools of assets, including the Vatican, because we've seen recently about their alliance that they've made for inclusive capitalism, and that they're the dungeon masters. So just like sit with that for a minute. And that's what we're looking at. And I know it seems outlandish, but I make these maps. And this, to my best ability, is my understanding of where things are going.
Allison, have you seen Social Dilemma on Netflix?
I haven't watched the whole thing. I mean, anything on Netflix, you know, is doing their work.
I mean, I agree, but that was what was so crazy about it, was they showed this digital twin concept, and it's a grotesque horror. So I was just going to confirm, for those who think this sounds crazy, it's actually being documented out there even by these very big tech firms that are in collusion with the project.
Yeah, I would say, I know like Shoshana Zuboff gets a lot of traction out there. I mean, she's a professor from Harvard Business School. So clearly she's sitting at the table of the people who are building this machine. And I know because she was at a gathering with Kevin Werbach, who I'll talk about later, from Wharton. Another book that I do recommend is Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. And he really frames the internet as a military enterprise. And so I think those of us who lean more towards like an anti-imperialist peace framing, that book is very vital, and it also plays into some of the discussions around blockchain moving forward. Can you find liberation in the master's tools? Can you navigate? Are you going to find freedom in a technology that is fundamentally militarized? And to me, I have my own personal understanding that I would say no. Maybe other people are still convinced that it could be otherwise. But in this, I just want to say, Gates provides a lot of cover for other people. Michael Bloomberg, I think, is perhaps even more dangerous. And these two have teamed up. They've collaborated together. They worked on the domain awareness system for New York City, which was their coordinated facial recognition camera security apparatus. They go way back. So these guys are a formidable pair. Bill Gates, his job is to get us all tagged into the human capital system through the vaccine platform. And he also has side deals, running the GMO foods and the, private for-profit prisons and a lot of other things he'll make money on. But his job is to get us on the blockchain. Michael Bloomberg will then run the global police state. Okay. And he will do that. The global police state will not look the same as we understand the carceral state today. It needs to go beyond the new Jim Crow. The new version will be an open air global prison run perhaps a little softer, I won't say much softer, by social workers and healthcare providers. And your body will be your prison, in a sense. So that is their framing, is what they would like to see it. So next to it, though, I juxtapose. I spent some time, like I said, in South Dakota, actually, and this place is Promise, right? And so that's very symbolic, actually. And the more I think about it, they don't control. I mean, literally, they don't control that because that's indigenous sovereign land. But they don't control the cosmic entities, the sky, the sunsets, even at these microscopic levels, and the wildflowers. They don't control all of it. They control some of it. And I think we can sometimes get caught up in feeling like they can control everything, but they don't. They don't control everything. So this is a very interesting thing to me. And folks who maybe have a more familiarity, the occult aspects of this, the sort of Freemasonry, the going way back is not my strength. But I feel like it is very significant that Michael Bloomberg established his European headquarters in London, and which is a center of blockchain. But this opened in 2017, I believe, and he built it over the archaeological remains of this temple of Mithras.
Wow.
So it's pretty serious. I mean, he had money; he could build it anywhere, right? And that is where he built it. And so Mithras is this god of sun, justice, and contracts. So I really want to point out contracts, because the video game world that they would like us to live in is based on this presumption that the world, our engagement with nature and the physical world and the built environment, will be mediated through digital contracts. Okay, that our ability to engage or not engage will be predetermined by our status in the world. And we're already seeing that with the mobility biometric passports, but that will go at a scale that we can't even imagine. And in that Black Mirror episode Nosedive is sort of predictive programming for that. Your social credit score dictates what you are allowed to do in society. So this contract piece, and I just found this morning, is very important. The idea of these Ethereum smart contracts tied to social credit scoring is part of the Internet of Agreements. And this is a company, Materium, also based in London. And for people who are more familiar than I am in the sovereignty movement, is that the understanding is that the blockchain center needed to be London because that was the center of maritime trade law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also, just if I could add, the city of London is a really important piece of the equation too, as far as understanding who's really controlling a lot of these things. So that's for those out there who want to research this deeper. I would look at that too.
Yeah. So the maritime trade laws, the cloud, what is the jurisdiction of the cloud? Right? This is what Yasha Levine asked. Who runs the cloud, right? A certain type, a small subset of individuals. What are legal jurisdictions for digital twins in the cloud? And these are all things that we need to be thinking about. It's a new form of vocabulary. And those who are rolling this agenda out are very familiar with it, but it's something that we need to become more familiar with. So I had mentioned before that this is going to align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Most people, if you have not looked at them, you might presume that they are mostly about the environment, right? That's what Extinction Rebellion, that's what sort of the corporate wrong kind of green has framed it, that it is about saving the planet. 2/3 of those goals, there are 17, are actually about managing poor people. They're about managing poverty. And so this is about this new version of inclusive capitalism. And clearly a hinge in this is managing global health. And I did not appreciate this until pandemic hit. I did not know what the trigger for this rollout was going to be. Clearly it is the pandemic. And so I'm spending more time looking at the health side because your status, essentially, you are presumed to be guilty of living in a human body. You're guilty because you might be a threat, you might be toxic, until you are managed through our technological systems. And in that way, your body can then become the limiting factor in your life experience, right? Where you can go, where you can move. And I'm trying to, hopefully, if people are listening around the immigration rights movements with global geofencing, because the individuals involved in this who are remaking nonprofits for data-driven government are, one of the major ones is Hewlett Packard. They're also the ones putting laptops for digital education in all the kids' hands. So Hewlett Packard is running the border, biometric border control in Gaza, which is in my mind, fundamentally the prototype open air prison. So we need to understand that Hewlett Packard has remade nonprofits for data-driven investment and that they are running education sectors. I would not be surprised if they're also in the healthcare sector and that they're doing border control, which at this point, if you cannot prove that you are safe, quote unquote, as a healthy being with all the right papers, you may not be able to leave your house. Like your geofencing could be your front door. Your geofencing could be, okay, well, we'll let you go 5 miles from your house. Well, you have to stay in your state. You know, they can essentially, through satellite geofencing, control people's mobility. And all of our care, all of our social care has to become platformed for these deals that I'm going to be talking about because it all runs on data. It all runs on data analytics. And that's where, again, the energetic system, the electrical engineering, we have to be turned into data, these binary ones and zeros, to be processed through these systems to have profit extracted from our bodies and our social relationships. So the reason that we're losing our education and our in-person education, our in-person healthcare, our in-person therapy is because of these deals, because they will need to extract the data and the predictive analytics out of these online platforms in order to run the next version.
Allison, if I could just jump out here a second. So, you know, in this window, I've been doing a lot to try to bring awareness to the fact that they've just redefined our body as a threat to the world, basically, you know, because we have a microbiome, we have a virome, we have exosomes. So therefore, we are potentially, you know, bioterrorist vectors. So the piece that you're bringing in is so important, which is in order to, you know, roll out this new surveillance era where they're penetrating into the body. And then we can talk later about, you know, sort of the cellular colonization, which you bring up in one of your presentations. They're now transforming that surveillance into data, which is then a new capital market. But it all fits in now so much better in understanding why they would do such a thing. Because most people are like, they can't believe they would just do this, you know, but now it makes more sense given what you're bringing to light.
Well, and the interesting, so again, and there's language around it, right? The full Babylon service. I mean, it's kind of in your face what's going on here, that they're going to use their data analytics. Like, look, you know, now we're all going to experience everything through our phones for the full Babylon service. And, you know, it's very strange because I don't like normally, like my mode of operation really is primary source material, like looking at people's LinkedIns, looking at World Bank white papers, listening to webinars of what the industry is saying that they're planned. It's not actually hidden if you're willing to synthesize it. And I think the reality is that most people who are pulling down a 6-figure salary in one of those spaces are not in a position to question it. And then most people who are most impacted, the poor, are living their lives and they certainly don't have time to spend weeks and weeks and months poring over this material. So I'm in a really kind of a singular space to be able to do this work. But it also lays on the land in Philadelphia, and it, you know, it has this history. And when you spoke about the microbiome, I'm trying to remember, his name is slipping my mind, but in the 1694, this Silesian monk came to Philadelphia to await the end of the world with 40 monks, and they were waiting for the woman in the wilderness. And they were out in what is now the Wissahickon Park. It's in the city of Philadelphia, and they were alchemists, and they did very interesting choral singing, which I find interesting. And his cave, Kelpius, Johannes Kelpius, the Kelpius cave is still in the park. And the cave is really more like a spring house, right? But it's an underground room with a door. And there's a monument right outside. It's in the public park. You can go see. And it's from the Rosicrucians. And evidently Kelpius was the first Rosicrucian in Philadelphia. And so this monument is from the Rosicrucians honoring Kelpius. And it's this granite monument. And on the side of it, so one day I wanted to go see it, and I had connected with someone. Some people in your audience may be familiar. He's a very interesting guy, does very interesting research. His name is Roz Ben, and he's a geomancer, but he looks at art and history and some of these other like sort of hidden histories. And he had said his thesis is that Ben Franklin opened the gates of hell in Philadelphia with Prometheus. And it's electrical, again, more electricity, which is very interesting. But he had told me about this cave. So I'm like, I'm going to go see this cave. So I saw the monument on the side of this monument. And maybe someone can help me figure this out in Greek, written, not in spray paint and not inscribed, but very carefully in Greek. It said Nephili.
Nephili? Like as in
on the side of this monument. Okay.
That's because in these bloodlines that control
so
the world.
Nephili is a myth. It's a Greek myth of the cloud goddess. And Ixion had lusted after Hera, so Zeus turned this cloud nymph into a twin of Hera. And then she was raped, and from that came the centaurs. And a lot of times now they're talking about cyborgs, that it's better to call them centaurs. And then later, like the twins, there was famine, there was the seeds failed, the crops failed, and the ram with the golden fleece came to save the twins. But there's this interesting connection of Nephili between twins, clouds, violence, hybrid beings, children taken. But then if you actually look up, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, just created a software platform for mapping the microbiome called Nephili.
Oh, no way. Really? Wow.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. There are these overlaps of like history, symbol, signs, but last fall, Penn, which is Ben Franklin's university, just did the first human CRISPR trials. So there are all of these layers going on. I'm not trying to be, but I think it's significant that there are these histories that need to be integrated, that people who may have access to other knowledges are know this and are using it.
Well, Allison, I just want to point out to those out there who also have been experiencing this, when we see people don these masks, call them submission signaling, it is such an occult-like vibe, because we have looked at the evidence in depth, and there's very little but some equivocal evidence as far as them being in any way effective at preventing transmission of community-acquired respiratory viruses, and as well, a lot of literature on their potential harm. So the fact that they're being forced on everyone, this is such a seemingly, occult phenomena. So anyway, it's a lot of
like spells. I mean, early on when I was doing this work before the pandemic, I said, I almost feel like I need like a background in semiotics, because they use language in ways that they say one thing and mean another. And so if you don't know their true intended meaning of how they talk about things, you will be totally misled. And I have a lovely community elder, who's always, she's like, Allison, you need a glossary. You need a glossary to interpret what they're actually saying. But I feel in some ways this, like a spell, they have used language and imagery to cast a spell over so many people, and that they have, it's interesting.
Well, and finally too, as far as this differentiation between the mythos and the logos, is that there was this bifurcation, and then we thought one sector of human experience was just sort of like, fiction, and then this is logic, rationality, what's real. And I think in this window, and what you're bringing up with some of these mythological threads, is that they've always been connected. And you just look at the etymology of some of the words that they're using, and you can start to see what the true intention and meaning really is. So
All right, zoom back down to central banking. So it's important to know, like, if people are like, I don't really know, really human capital bonds? Yes. So this is from the San Francisco Federal Reserve. They are very much in the lead on developing this space. And now it makes perfect sense to me. It really just sunk into me last night. Stanford was the epicenter of developing social innovation. And much of it was also connected to engineering and business analytics and wearable technology. Okay, so if you imagine that the global digital prison run from space is going to like control your body through wearable or ingestible or implantable tech, that the fact that it's the San Francisco Federal Reserve that is setting up these bond markets that will turn you into data and harvest your data, your life force as data through these different devices and required behaviors that will track your compliance to these assigned pathways, that it would be coming out of the San Francisco Fed. And Ian Galloway is a central figure in this. But it comes earlier. This is Stephen Rothschild collaborated with an economist at the Minneapolis Federal Reserve in the mid-1990s to create the concept of essentially a performance-based government contract. They will change up the names. It used to be social impact bonds, development impact bonds, pay for success, pay for performance. Ultimately, it is about a government contract that is tied to data. The payment is incumbent on a certain data outcome being shown. So these human capital performance bonds happen. I've made these little, my artist kind of, basic, but I was trying to explain this to people, these social impact bonds. And so I made a video about 2 or 3 years ago and just trying to lay it out visually. But it's important to understand that all of this is advancing on austerity. It's all advancing on global austerity, both austerity of people's personal budgets and deep debt, but also austerity in government. Because what's coming, this sort of techno-fascism, relies on the idea of a public-private partnership. If Amazon paid taxes and our government had money to take care of people's needs, people who are in need, whether it would be their health or their housing or their education, we would not be in this situation. So this is sliding in. This has been in the works. As I said, Stephen Rothschild and Art Wolnick were working in the mid-1990s. There's been several decades of austerity that have teed all of this up, and it's central. And I will frame this. This is a racialized endeavor. This is coming after all of us, but it's a program that runs on poverty and trauma. So the people who are first up and who it's being prototyped on are Black and brown people and Indigenous people and dispossessed people and refugees. Okay, so it is sort of the global North going after the global South and also going after the poor of our country. So
can I add something else? And so here in Florida, I read the 52-page document on how they're going to distribute the COVID vaccines, and they make it so explicit that they're targeting minority groups under the false auspices of them being underserved, underprivileged. So everything seems so inverted, but just to confirm what you're saying, it's very targeted to those groups.
Yeah. And then, and this is, to me, if we understand that what we are up against is in the near future, a sublimation of humanity into some cyborg, transhumanist, neural web, hive mind scenario, it actually, like, the differences in some of the identity politics stuff, if we're willing to come from a heart space and we're willing to actually understand the history of it, but it's a unifying opportunity. Like, nobody wants this stuff that's coming. It's a billionaire's project. And then some people are deluded because they're getting a salary and maybe they think that they're going to be kept out of it. But essentially what's happening is capitalism is moving into the virtual world and taking everything else with it and turning us into digital twins in the process. And so if we can just communicate that to people, they want to use the partisanship to divide people so that we're fighting each other instead of looking at Davos. They want to push everybody, like every single element that would identify, like, whether it's, women, Black, brown, Indigenous, religious groups, they want everyone to be divided. And what I'm saying is, in any box that they would like to put us in, because they want us in lots of boxes, and I'll show you later, they're the Skinner box. They would like to keep us in boxes, that no box has all the good people or all the bad people. And so my task is, bad being, in quotes, I guess, but our task feels like it is to be able to pull the people who are coming from a space of love and caring of humanity and nature, the natural world, out of the boxes so that we can face this challenge that's coming. Mm-hmm. So yes, the public-private partnership is central to this program. So the government says, we don't have really the money to do this, or we're not feeling like it. We're going to outsource it to a nonprofit and investors. You can front that money. And this is going to be a little, I'm going to spend a minute with this. This is the social impact bond structure. Essentially, the entire construct of pay for success finance is predicated on using data to predictively profile individuals and communities into being future burdens on society. Okay, so the idea of this structure is that every person is a burden. Some are more of a burden than others on society, and that has a cost attached. Okay, so it's based on data, it's based on machine learning, it's based on profiling, whether or not, and a lot of that data in the AI is racialized and wrong and bad data. But they're going to do it anyway because they're the ones running the game. If they can come up with a quote unquote solution in the framing of an evidence-based, that's their language, evidence-based program. Sometimes in the healthcare space, they call it value-based program that has data to show that you have you fixed this person, even preemptively. Then essentially in this space, this reduction. So say this is incarcerated people, which is a huge cost offset. It's based in carbon credit trading. There's this huge cost offset. Whether this cost offset is prison, this cost offset could be the payments to manage people on Medicaid who are diabetic. It could be the cost offset of underemployment because people are depressed. This is the burden. You're predictively profiled, and they say if we fix you, we've saved you all of this money. Aren't we wonderful with our nonprofit evidence-based program that's backed by investors? Can we just have our money back? And we're just like a little slice of this for our profit. We don't need a lot. Just give us a little bit. And then look at all of this that you've saved. You've saved a ton of money on your own, and we'll just take a little bit. Okay. So that is the narrative of this structure. Look, everybody is broken. We're going to fix you. The fix, remember, has to be data-driven. So that's why you have to have a Hewlett-Packard Chromebook or, Chromebook. That's why you can't go see your doctor. That's why, my elderly father with dementia that the Alzheimer's place would only do tele appointments. Tell me how that works, right? That's why we're going to be slipping sensors in babies' tunics to listen to their parents talk to them because they need the data. Now, this profit in and of itself is not much money. And that's what people say. They say, well, they must be doing it, JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, out of the goodness of their own heart, because it's not that much money, right? They're not making that much money on it. They're just doing it because they care about kids having pre-K, or they care about people returning from prison having a job, or they care about people having healthier, more nutritious meals. That's not true. They need it to move their money. And so the big money is going to be in creating hedge fund markets. They are going to securitize the debt on the program investments. They're going to securitize that debt, and then they are going to trade it on global markets. But they cannot run this game of hedge fund trading. Like I said from the beginning, imagine the mortgage, the asset-backed securities now are toddlers, pregnant women, the lonely elderly people returning from prison. The debt tied to all of those people is securitized and traded on global markets. And this is not just US, right? Like if you're in these programs, the debt attached to you is being bought up by SoftBank, the Vatican, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, all of these different, your pension funds, Kaiser Permanente, TIA, CREF, they're all putting a chunk of you. You're just part of somebody's portfolio. And that's what it goes back to that early slide. So, it may not make sense. It may seem crazy, but if you understand that the whole asset-backed securities and the collateralized debt obligations of the last time were crazy, they're just making it a game, okay? But they cannot play this game if this structure does not exist.
So basically,
if the system doesn't exist, they cannot play the game. So they must create and be able to scale this. It has to scale. And what they need to scale it is they need blockchain identity and they need 5G, eventually 6G, to track you in real time in the surveillance state to inform the securitization and the gambling on that by the hedge funds.
So just to confirm, so on the primary level of the narrative they've laid down, it's predicated on things like humans are a burden, they're going to have a negative impact like carbon footprints or poverty, whatever. And then they make it look like they're being, philanthro-capitalists and they're trying to help the world by, making a little profit. But on a secondary, tertiary level, they're securitizing and they're creating a derivative market that could be worth trillions of dollars. And it's similar to the credit default swap mortgage situation, the crisis of 2008.
Yeah.
So it just sets up bubbles and they control and profit off of misery, basically. Yeah.
Right. And I will say, so I'll show later, I make these maps, these big maps. And so some of the debt is going to be, is my understanding is there's three primary areas. There's the education and lifelong learning, reskilling training, right? And we're seeing that happening now in New Jersey. The governor, who's former Goldman Sachs, has set up career impact bonds to reskill people pushed out of work into jobs to build the global police state. They're going to be doing smart energy, big pharma, and coding, okay? And that debt, not only the debt for their training, but their wraparound services, right? If you need housing, if you need help, your childcare, if you need therapy, you're going to create these income sharing agreements that will garnish your future wages under contract. And ultimately, the goal is that will all be done on blockchain, on the ultimate ledger. Okay. And going back, the history again, this is doctrine of discovery. This is the papal bull saying you can come if you're not Christian, if you're black and brown folks, we can take your bodies and your stuff. But all of that maritime trade was carried out with double entry bookkeeping. Okay. That was the rise of double entry bookkeeping with the maritime trade to keep track of all of it. The new version is the decentralized ledger, cryptographic decentralized ledger is blockchain. Blockchain identity is the next iteration of that. That is what's coming, and that is why all of the big accounting firms globally, Accenture, Deloitte, and KPMG in particular, are all over this stuff because the accountants are going to be checking the books on the human capital bonds. It's important to know. Okay, so this is just a visual that I had, and I know sometimes we talk about like Fordism and post-Fordism. Like to me, this is this advanced manufacturing car factory line. And if you imagine that, where it used to be that there were people putting together the cars, now it's robots putting together the cars. That if we are human as human beings, in nature, there's also an element to this because the Sustainable Development Goals also have nature in there too. So but for this, human beings are broken, are in process, being optimized for life. On these pathways, which is this line I showed you before, that the cliff walk, you're on this assembly line, you're being assembled, you don't have your own autonomy, you can't get off the assembly line. And these evidence-based programs are managing you. Okay, they're putting you together, taking you apart, whatever. Like it is these automated systems that are tied to nonprofits. And on all of this infrastructure that is being set up as stakeholder capitalism, under the framing of pay for success finance, it's the hedge funds that are going to come out on top. So just kind of keep this visual in your head. So I just have this infographic just to sort of highlight again how this works. We have austerity, right? We have these outcomes-based contracts that are built on the austerity. You create a narrow success metric, okay? So maybe the success metric for the investment is that, in diabetes, that your glucose level drops or your body mass index changes. In education, it was that children who got pre-K didn't need special education. It could be that you gave an unhoused person housing and then their employment metrics were improved. You have some measure of improvement, but it tends to have to be something that you can put on a dashboard. It has to be data and has to be something that can be scaled. So often the metrics for success might look good on a dashboard, but they do not materially benefit the individuals being managed. Because if you create a global investment market in poverty that is profitable, you have no incentive to stop poverty or misery. If it's profitable, you will just manage it better. So the investors provide the front for these services, which will also be medical services. And those will include wearable technology. We talked about the debt securitization. People are monitored to get the data. And that is where, seriously, in the health tech, MTech, telemedicine is going to be huge, because a lot of it will be screen-based, but increasingly we know it's going to be wearable tech and potentially implantable tech with these biosensors. So that we are living in the panopticon for these deals. And the power and no amount of good behavior in these deals is going to make Jeff Bezos' money come down to poor people. It's only going to make Jeff Bezos more money. It's only going to further concentrate the money. In these deals, they are structured that they have a third party review them. So that's what makes it legitimate. Oh, we're not cooking the books. Look, we had a third party look and they said that the deal is good, that we met our criteria. The data looks good. Well, in this case, in the case of social impact bonds in Santa Clara County, California, there were 4 pilots. There was a pre-K, an early literacy, a mental health, and a housing. And those were connected to the University of California, San Francisco system and the hospital system there, the mental health and the housing. That data was actually reviewed by Palantir. Now, Palantir is Peter Thiel's company. He's behind PayPal. So again, digital, all of these systems are going to run on digital script, but also, Palantir is about Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and predictive policing. Okay, so now Palantir's got their hands in your data if you're an unhoused person needing shelter. So and then we find out if the deal is paid or not, and then the cycle goes around.
I just want to zoom out for a moment, because there is a couple comments that definitely I can connect to, which is, first of all, this one slide, what you presented in just the past 5 minutes, is just so important that this being recorded to me feels like some great accomplishment, because people could dig into this for weeks and start to really see the whole. I think for many people, it's a bit overwhelming as well. So I'm with you there, but it's a good overwhelm. Like I know that you're doing this, you're connecting the dots for us. But I just want to give some people some thoughts to connect this back to, I guess, the original topic, which is that if this sounds obscure and it sounds hard to grasp, consider that Klaus Schwab, who's the chairman of the World Economic Forum, he was part of the Event 201 operation that some call the Plandemic in New York City in October of last year, where along with Gates and Bloomberg and other very powerful private and public individuals, they went ahead and said they're launching this operation. And this stakeholder capitalism concept is fundamental to this new world that Klaus Schwab and his cohorts over there in Davos have said they're going to try to bring in under the sort of auspices of bio health security and COVID-19. And this is going to be no property. You're going to rent everything. You're going to be happy, and you're going to live in this surveillance state. So just keep that in mind. What Allison's talking about is absolutely what's unfolding around us, but she's kind of going to the inner workings of it in such a way that I really feel this is going to provide us activists and people trying to connect the dots an essential document that we can share with others, get it out to as many people as you can. It's not all going to make sense immediately, but if you stay with us here by the end of the presentation, I feel like you're going to download something extremely important that will help you to anticipate the events that are unfolding. And hopefully, with the way we end this, we'll give you some tips on how spiritually we can work together as activists to really have a chance against this operation. So sorry to interrupt, Allison. I just saw some comments. I wanted to just give them a little context.
It's a lot. I mean, and the thing I want to point out too here are these little bubbles, the hedge funds, and then the shorting, is that this is being sold to everyone largely by Michael Bloomberg. And again, Michael Bloomberg sort of owns dozens, if not hundreds, of mayors and municipal officials across the country, especially in mid-sized cities, and also in Europe, in the EU, and in India. Okay, and so he frames this as what works government. It's tied to this impact management project, and they're saying that it works. And this is fully bipartisan. This is advancing in a fully bipartisan way. And the framing is that if you're fiscally conservative, you say, well, we're only paying if it works, so it must be a good deal. And then the people on the liberal side are saying, well, we feel really good because we know people have needs that are being met, right? And so so it's sort of like free market in human beings, but people's needs are being met. And they're framing it as a win-win. But what they're forgetting is that once you securitize the debt, someone is betting that you're not going to make it out, right? Like you say you come up with a mental health social impact bond. You can't say that even if the metrics say that the performance metrics are that reduce suicide rates, if that debt is securitized, some AI out there running a hedge fund is going to say, I'm going to bet there's going to be more suicides. Right. Wow. And what I want to actually put out, and this goes to what I'm going to sort of move into next, is that we are operating in worlds where these systems are increasingly connected to smart environments, such that it is not inconceivable at some point in the future, the AI running the hedge funds could change up how individuals or populations are able to function in their environments. They're smart environments that are run on sensor networks or even sensors in their bodies to make the outcomes that are profitable to them happen. Just like sit with that for a minute. And I think a lot of people who are coding these things are not anticipating that it would ever get away from them, right? They imagine themselves to be good people who are doing the right thing. How could they ever be doing something that could be a problem? And what I'm saying is that this is a machine. This is actually a profane structure that we are all in. And I'm not wagging fingers. I mean, I'm able to do this in no large part because I have a spouse who enables me to have a part-time job and do this work. I'm not saying any of us are blameless. We're all in it to some extent. But increasingly, we are going to be going down this road where you have to have your eyes open and find points of resistance and find common cause with every step. Or we could very easily end up in something where a decentralized autonomous organization, which is a company run on blockchain, say Bill Gates or Michael Zuckerberg put their money, their quote unquote philanthropic capitalist money in a DAO to run these hedge fund shorts. It's not out of the question. I will also say that in this game, and I've seen this in the education sphere, is that the logic of this market indicates that they want a profile of a broken person who will, with few, not much investment, show good returns as data on a dashboard. So if you are someone with a lot of trauma, who doesn't have very good prospects for being improved by your intervention, they're probably not going to put you in their trial, their program. If you're someone who isn't all that broken, you've got some baggage, but you're not that bad and you don't have a lot of growth potential, you also are not going to be a good fit for a portfolio that is prioritizing profit. What they are looking for are people who are very broken, that with a modest investment, quote unquote, into a solution can be rapidly fixed. And I will say in this, I feel very strongly that genomics will factor into this and epigenetic trauma, because Chan Zuckerberg is playing a major role in this space. And what is needed for these games and the predictive profiling is interoperable data. That interoperable data in the healthcare space will be your electronic health records tied to your digital identity. In schools, it was DataZone was the model in San Jose. It was backed by the Packard Foundation. And also then Chan Zuckerberg scaled it. And now they scaled it into something called the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust. And at the launch of that event, Priscilla Chan was the keynote, but there was a panel discussion and David Hausler was in that space. And he's from UC Santa Cruz, I believe, and he put the human genomic sequence on the internet. So if the idea that these impact markets are going to be built on interoperable data that's being set up by Chan Zuckerberg, and they're inviting David Hausler to the launch of this, that's very significant. To me, that says there is going to be a genomic element in the profiling. And I think this also plays into what we saw with BlackRock, I believe. Is it Blackstone? Blackstone bought Ancestry.com. That these predictive profilings on your human capital are going to have genomic elements. And again, talking about it being racialized and coming from a space of eugenics. So, fourth sector fascism. They need a new instrument to run capitalism again. That's the frustrating part. Everybody on the left, or so many people, were looking like, look, the whole system is falling apart. Great, it's going to be our turn. We're going to have some other option that is more just or more fair to the people. That capitalism cannot possibly hold under this. Look at the lockdowns, it's all falling apart. It's because they're not engaging with the material that I'm sharing, which is really frustrating. Essentially, what has happened is that capitalism must continue to grow and the cash must move. And in a world of finite resources, because clearly, we are mining and polluting and, the water and the air and harming, our fellow beings and, animals and plants in the world. Like, we're causing all of this harm in our consumer culture. For that to continue as an economic growth model, it needs to be virtualized. It needs to go into it needs to break through the wall and go into the gamified space, and that's the digital twinning. So capitalism has jumped into, and has probably been in there for a while, and that's what you see with Minecraft and other things where you have virtual world building and virtual spaces where you can even own, in gaming, really, digital assets. You own property and items in a digital space, and that is actually what blockchain was intended for. Blockchain was created to track digital assets. And those digital assets are not just fiat currency. They're anything. Your digital asset could be your sword in a game, right? It could be the little outfit that your third grader earns for good behavior in the classroom behavior management system. Any of these digital assets are going on blockchain. So it's gone into the virtual world. They need a new model because old version capitalism is not working. They need essentially fascism, which is the corporate takeover of the government, and it's going to be called the fourth sector. So the third sector used to be called nonprofits. The fourth sector is benefit corporations, and it's a hybrid of public-private partnerships. So they're saying we're companies, but we're actually good companies. We care about people. Well, that's the narrative. They're saying they're companies that care about people, and it's framed as like Ben and Jerry's, right? Like, we're going to do shade grown coffee and fair trade textiles, but that is all a veneer to essentially cover over, to provide, to mask a very deep level of government takeover of the public realm, private takeover of the public realm through these contracting systems. And you can see here's Pope Benedict in 2009 is already saying, like, here's the Vatican, like the Vatican's involvement in inclusive capitalism. This is nothing new. This is just the next phase that's going. So, sometimes I talk about it not just as techno-fascism, but theological techno-fascism, because again, it is based on the doctrine of discovery and faith-based enterprises, not just Catholic, but all faiths. Anyone with any faith community that has a lot of money running through it is going to be captured in this new system.
Allison, I was looking at one of your presentations yesterday, and even I got really ensnared by this B corporation concept. It sounded so good. I was like, well, Agreement Info should be a B corporation. And then right there, you show that it was architected by the Rockefeller Foundation, which was such a red flag for me.
I know. Well, that's why I say, like, when I was like a few years ago talking with a person, a friend and, somebody of a lot of faith. And he said, you're a Jeremiah, like, you're supposed to do this. And I'm not saying I'm doing because I'm better, I'm smarter, or anything. There are too many things that have happened in my life to put me in a space to see this thing that I'm supposed to do it. And part of that is this situation in Philadelphia, its connection to Wharton. The B Lab, the Benefit Corporation Lab, it's based in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, which is the main line, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And I like to go see these things because I'm a landscape person. I actually like to see them because you can, if you like, nobody knows your dog on the internet, right? Like, you actually have to go and see it. And I knew, so this is Judith Rodin. She was the former president of the University of Pennsylvania. Like, again, remember Ben Franklin, opened the gates of hell in Philadelphia, and Penn is his university. And so when she stepped down, she became the head of the Rockefeller Foundation. And so right up in the lead in and the direct aftermath of the last global economic crash, the Rockefeller Foundation was setting up this entire global investment global impact investment network, the stakeholder capitalism game. They needed the new game, and the Rockefeller Foundation was going to set the rules of the game. Because if you have a game, even if the rules seem nonsensical to most people, as long as everyone playing agrees, the game goes on.
Wow.
So someone, a trusted authority, needed to set the rules of the game, and those would be the impact metrics. And that is what B Lab was set up to do by the Rockefeller Foundation, was to create the social impact metrics for this next game. So this is not free market. This is stuff that was seeded through capitalism programs. It was seeded through sneaky government programs to make these investment markets work. They would not be sustainable on their own. The other piece of this is, so I will say too, the B Lab, I went out there to see it. The main line is actually a rail line, which is interesting because rail and empire, there are a lot of connections between the domestic empire and the takeover of indigenous lands tied to trains. And around the world, that trains being used to take over land and property from the rightful owners of it. And I do think that the broadband and the 5G is the next train.
Wow.
There's a great
Wow.
book called Empire's Tracks
Wow.
about that. So it's interesting that the B Lab is on this train line.
Wow. Quick
And I
question.
went out, and actually, it's a sad little building. It's like an old train building, actually.
Amazing.
It's not very fancy. Like to see it online, it would look super fancy.
Wow.
And it was like the picture window with sort of a tattered, awning over the door, and dusty, disused floral vases in the window. And then when I went and I looked at the post box, and it actually said they share the building with the Exton Dog Show.
Wow. Well, that's like in Basel, the International Bank of Settlements once was in this really nondescript old building that no one would have known was like the heart of global, finance and control. We had a question though, because there was a long pause after you asked the question around what would shorting the social impact bonds look like, or what is that? It's sort of like a nefarious implication, but could you spell that out for our listeners?
So I have like a document from the Kauffman Foundation and Ready Nation saying that they're securitized. The plan is to securitize all of this debt. Right now, there are only pilot projects. There are like 20 in the country of these social impact bonds. I mean, there's way more pay for success programs. There's like probably hundreds of those. They haven't been able to securitize it yet because they haven't been able to scale it. Okay, you can't securitize a handful of deals. If you understand the way that like the mortgages, they said thousands. Like if you in the opening scene of The Big Short, the new guy at the company, the guy says, go figure out what's in those those asset-backed securities, those mortgages. And this new guy, he's like, but there's thousands of individual mortgages in those deals. And he's like, yeah, I know. And so we don't have the thousands yet. And so, I don't know exactly. I mean, I don't know if it's elimination of people, if it's further enslavement of people. And I don't know that they all know exactly how it's going to go either. But that's what they say that their plan is to securitize this next level of debt.
Yes.
So I'm just here to say, I hope none of this is going to happen, and they can't scale it, and blockchain is not scalable, and there's not enough energy to run it and whatever. I hope none of this happens. But I'm here to share with you what they're saying so that we can be prepared. Because I know a lot of people in this space are going to be working in places and have family and different things that have connections into this machine. Well, and if we're not willing to question and say, should we really be putting babies on blockchain? That doesn't sound, for what purpose? Who has the power in this equation? That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I feel like you're so ahead of what's coming due to the fact that they are going to try to remove actual physical currency to roll out the central bank digital currency instruments, which are primarily for surveillance and control. So I think that obviously this area is going to it's just going to expand exponentially as far as the data and the control. So I think you're helping us see that future.
I would say one other thing that's interesting to think about. So one of the deals that they trot out to say, look, sometimes it doesn't work and we don't pay it. Sometimes it doesn't work. Is the Rikers Island social impact bond. And that was the first one that was brought. This was started in the United Kingdom by Sir Ronald Cohen. He's a Harvard MBA. I think he's probably very deeply tied in the sort of central banking dark shadows stuff. But he set it up in the UK. They have quite a robust social impact bond architecture there. He brought it and he backstopped the deal. So he said, oh, if the deal fails, I'll still pay the investors. Okay, so Bloomberg Philanthropy backstopped the deal. I think it was with Goldman Sachs, among others. And it was for youth incarceration. So the cost offset was that they would not be reincarcerated. And again, this is all based on the understanding that being caught in the judicial system is something solely of an individual's choice, life choices, as opposed to it being a structural program of managing excess globalized labor,
exactly.
right? That's targeting Black and brown people. So they don't, that set aside, they're not even counting that, but they're saying, you know, if we do this program with these youth who are incarcerated, we'll reduce the level of incarceration. That deal failed. But I actually, you know, I got access to the white paper out of Stanford, the case study, one of these case studies on social impact bonds. And in the fine print, they said, well, it failed because the people weren't really that into the program, and the population of people in the program dropped to the point that it wasn't a legit study anymore. That's why it failed. So essentially, fundamentally, the Rikers Island social impact bond failed because they didn't have enough kids incarcerated. They didn't have enough kids incarcerated to run the deal.
Got it.
So that's the logic of this market. Even though they're telling you it's a good thing. These deals run on incarcerated kids. If you don't have enough, the deals don't run.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other team person in this is Kevin Werbach. He is sort of like a wunderkind professor at Wharton, and his two specialties are gamification and blockchain. Okay. So gamification is a huge piece. Game theory and hedge fund, AI, game theory, and hedge funds all go together. So if you can push people onto leaderboards and make them perform, you're going to have a much better sense of making good bets on the outcomes of your deals. So, and then also his next thing after gamification is blockchain. So this is Kevin. He's giving a continuing education lecture for Wharton people. And Kevin says that it's really good to be the designer to make the rules. And so that needs to sit with us too. These people who know what's happening are making the rules, and we don't even know there's a game. We don't even know there's a game. We're in the game. There are designers. They've made the rules. The Rockefeller Foundation has made the rules. So this, just going back briefly to the Benefit Corporation, they tried to get a social benefit corporation law passed in California, and Arnold Schwarzenegger vetoed it, but he said it seems really good. So they brought it back to Pennsylvania, and then they developed it here in Philadelphia, this law firm Drinker Biddle. So again, I mentioned the Rockefeller Foundation funded the Global Impact Investment Network, which is IRIS, which are the impact metrics. And this is the time frame, right? So the last global economic crash, right? 2007, 2009. Here we go, B Corps. This is the new game being set up. Now, what's really important to understand is this California Assembly bill for social entrepreneurship that got vetoed, okay? So it was vetoed in 2008, but they said, and B-Lab and a bunch of lawyers and businesses in the Bay Area, because again, they're going to make money by pushing capitalism into a digital world and data mining the heck out of you in all spheres of your life. But it didn't pass. But at the same time, this Little Hoover Foundation was doing a report to Schwarzenegger. So this is 2007. This is the exact same time frame about a smarter way to care, transforming Medi-Cal for the future. So this timing is really important. They know that they want to get people on tracked as a data commodity. There are these different areas. It's education, healthcare, housing, food. Medicare and Medicaid, it is going to be a raid, right? And essentially the austerity and the single payer, a lot of this was teed up by the Affordable Care Act and the electronic health records. This is coming in under Obama. There's a reason that Obama was Chicago futures trading, Rahm Emanuel, all of that, Zeke Emanuel with the ACA, it's all commodities futures trading. So this report that's talking about transforming Medi-Cal for, again, what's going to be coming, which is social entrepreneurship, turning people's health into an impact investment market, it really puts managed care in a new light. this interoperable data that's needed is tied to the electronic health records. That's what Zeke Emanuel got into place. The big data analytics, the predictive, the precision medicine, right? The genomic. And again, I'm not to say that there aren't probably some very sophisticated tools for people who have complex and very serious illness for whom precision medicine may make sense. Okay, like I'm not, but to do it at a population level, which is what we are looking at now, is incredibly dangerous, and it doesn't make sense outside of these financial markets. The other piece is the shift to value-based payments. So the value-based payment is aligned to replace fee for service. They'll say, look, we're paying all this money and no one's getting better. Isn't it much better to come up with paying for performance? And this is the pay for performance element in the healthcare space, is value-based payments. So
and I'll just add, pay for performance could be reducing LDL levels in the blood, which actually do not necessarily address the root cause of heart disease. So it's a way of, if you will, weaponizing ignorance around sort of outdated medical ideas.
Right. And so this, again, I just want to hit, because I'm sure your audience is probably pretty familiar, but like, again, Rockefeller, remade medical education after the Flexner report, which I guess was the Carnegie funded that, right? So this century of re-engineering healthcare away from, alternative treatments into a very narrow corporate model, like that is directly tied to Rockefeller. They founded Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Okay, so the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health is now named after Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg was a trustee of Johns Hopkins and has given them, maybe even $1 billion, a lot of money. So that the public health school is named after Bloomberg. And I want to just reemphasize that public health, most people, if you hear public health, you think, those are good people. Those are caring people. They wanted people to be well. But fundamentally, Rockefeller was funding public health because it was as an imperial project. He would go to countries where he wanted the workers to be healthy, to do the work, to carry out the work of his corporate interests, and just be well enough to do that work. That is the origins of public health. And so Cornelius Rhodes, there's a really good book called How to Hide an Empire. How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr. And it talks about a lot of this and using public health as an imperial, the larger imperial project, but there's a whole chapter on this guy, Cornelius Rhodes. Cornelius Rhodes was backed by Rockefeller University. He was sent to Puerto Rico to work on anemia and I think hookworm. He was a Boston Brahmin, and he was sent there, and he wrote a letter that actually triggered the Puerto Rican nationalist movement, because he said this was, I believe, in the 1920s. Puerto Rico is really beautiful, except the Puerto Ricans, and I really hate them, and I'm trying to kill them, and I'm injecting them with cancer. And he left this letter out, and it triggered, this, clear outrage over that this person, this public health official, would come and actually actively harm the people that they were supposed to be helping. But he was whisked away back to Boston. He never, and then he essentially became the head of chemical warfare in World War II. And then he used chemical weapons on Puerto Ricans, tested him on our soldiers, Puerto Ricans in Central America, and dropped chemicals on them, and then harmed those soldiers, and then used that material to create chemotherapy. And so there's a big cancer treatment prize that was awarded for the longest time until the Puerto Ricans found out about it in the early 2000s, named after him. And so this is actually what the medical establishment is. And I'm very late to the game. I'm sure your people are way much farther, but I don't know who's listening in. So I just this is important context for the Rockefellers, because it's imperial. And what's coming with these mRNA medicines, this is from the Moderna website. They frame it as the software of life. Their goal is to colonize us down to our cells. The goal of empire is to colonize us down to our very cellular elements. And with the understanding that the fourth industrial revolution is very much linked to these synthetic biology programs and linked to people who anticipate that we will no longer, as Elon Musk keeps going over and over again, be natural human beings, that we will be connected to hive minds, these human computer interfaces, And there's a woman, Celeste, who I don't know her last name, but she's always very good on the hydrogel. Yeah. And like just looking at the graphene flagship project. I mean, I had never heard of graphene until I listened to her talk, and it's all laid out. I mean, if someone gives you the guidebook and says, go look at graphene, it's right there. This is another paper someone shared with me. This is out of Georgia Tech, and I think it may be 10 years old. And Georgia Tech does a lot of contract work with the US Army, with the military. And they're saying, talking to Alexa and talking to your phone is not good enough. We actually want to create the bio-nano things, pervasive nanotech, where actually our entire being and thoughts are colonized and interacting with nanoparticulates, and our world is completely synthetic and not natural.
Point out too, that the present mRNA vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna were funded by DARPA going back to 2013, over $1.5 billion. So they're already rolling it out now, what we're talking about here in terms of the Internet of Bodies and the colonization of our cells, et cetera.
Yeah. So it's a colonial project. So again, it's a colonial project. It's about, here's the foreign affairs. It's about innovative finance revolution. And this is, this was a special issue presented with the Rockefeller Foundation, right? So this key to unlocking the impact markets is essentially the deployment of a global biosecurity state, the mandate of having biometric health passports with ongoing testing, whether that's initially through blood testing or eventually biosensor testing. I don't know if you remember early on, there was the president of the St. Louis Federal Reserve. And this was before anybody even had access to tests. There were not many tests available. And he said in an interview on mainstream media, he said, I think we need to test every person every day, which sounded ridiculous at the time. It sounded totally ridiculous unless you understand that the goal for the Human Capital Bond Program, which the Federal Reserve is intertwined with, is to create real-time biosensors. Right? If you're doing a real-time biosensor, you could theoretically test people for all sorts of things, supposedly every day. And so he knows, these people on the inside know exactly what's coming down. So the COVID testing action plan is the key to the unlocking. And again, your body is central to this. The blockchain is central. And this is what's very frustrating with people who only are looking at cryptocurrencies, is that it's about the smart contracts. It's about how you interface with an Internet of Things world. Consensus is at the center of that, about Ethereum smart contracts. They're part of the Social Impact Coalition, the Social Impact. So this is not with your consent. These people don't maybe want to be impacted by you, by global finance, to be a commodity of global finance, to be colonized by global finance. But they've decided they've built an entire world to impact the poor. And Shanzai City is very cutting edge, and I encourage people to look into this. It also goes by IO2 Foundation. The gentleman is based out of Hong Kong, but he was trained at Columbia and I think University of London, so very worldly, that they've now got using machine vision and filming on phones or tablets, that they can use facial recognition and video to document conditions and behaviors out in the world, even in places that are not like formally connected to the internet, upload it to blockchain and in this AI cloud data analytics, and use the machine vision to trigger impact payments on blockchain tokens for impact investors. And it sounds crazy, but they've already built it. They're already piloting it. Boa Vista, Brazil is the early childhood pilot case. And they're also using it in China. But this is the blending of very sophisticated Chinese, Asian facial recognition and AI with IXO Foundation is a partner in this, and that is the blockchain Crypto Valley Zug is Switzerland, but also the UN and these big banks, these big secret banks. And I think so. This is my take on Biden's plan about the COVID testing, is that they already have a pilot in Chula Vista, California, which is a suburb of San Diego. And I'm not 100%. This is from August. This was their plan to roll out cartridge-based testing for person-to-person, face-to-face learning for children in their school district. And it was going to go on a blockchain health program developed just for purpose. This company did not exist prior to this health event. Kahala Biosciences is out of Irvine, California. So these children are already being put on blockchain to go to their school. It's like a cartridge. And the thing also, even though technically blockchain ostensibly is secure, any data collected in an educational environment under FERPA, the Student Data Rights Protection, Obama gutted that. So any of this medical stuff that's happening in a school setting is very dangerous, either both behavioral health or medical, because the data is not safe. And this is my take on how this is going to happen with Biden, that why would you need multi-billions of dollars when our schools are falling apart? Well, you're going to do it because that's the key that they need. This is the keyhole. They're going to spend billions to get all the kids on blockchain. Now we'll see. I could be wrong, but in my gut, I think that that's probably where it's going to go. If not in the short-term future, that's the ultimate goal.
Well, once again, it makes total sense that now they can use this, I will call it a psychological operation, where they're saying that you have to be tested daily. I mean, I heard the Rockefeller Foundation folks and Federal Reserve folks say this early on, daily testing for all Americans, because it's about digitalizing everyday movements, access. And then again, now I see how they can profit off this. So before I was thinking, oh, it's more just about control. Now I see that what you're laying out makes much more sense of the matter.
Right. It's not just the surveillance. It's not just the software. It's not just the hardware. It's not just, potential vaccine injury. It's not just pharma profit. It's the hedge funds. Because if you imagine this, this economic pyramid at the top, the concentrated wealth, I describe them as militarized hedge funds, because a lot of that money is also tied in with the defense sector, right? Like it's these military anti-life entities up there. So just to sort of walk through these other models, I think some people will say, well, that's just one prototype, or that's way over in China, or that's in Brazil. That doesn't apply to my life. What I'm saying is that these, they call it healthcare as startup or software as solution. These cloud-based systems is once you have a pilot and you have an apparatus to scale them, they can be around the world very quickly. Right? Like once the policies are in place to allow it, and essentially we're living in a state of exception right now. So that's not hard because all of the governments, everybody's in on it other than the people. So they can make the policies, they can set the state of exception once they get the software. These blockchain identity systems are running through UNICEF because again, Sustainable Development Goals are the apparatus. So this is an education, a pre-K in South Africa. This is a blockchain identity for children in there. But also, the pre-K impact investing equation was developed by Jim Heckman out of the University of Chicago. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He made the equation that was, again, funded by J.B. Pritzker. So again, Chicago Futures and George Soros. So Open Society is funding Jim Heckman to impose this new economic transformation. They said that the rate of return on early childhood education and home visits was 7 to 10% annual rate of return. That's the Heckman equation. You can look it up. But you could push it to 13% if you had health impacts. So we're going to start to see things like putting wearable technology on children and having smart playgrounds so that they can get that extra health data and get that extra 3% rate of return. And, the people who are going to be investing that are going to be like our state pension funds, right? Like your pension funds are going to be investing in putting children on blockchain and then tracking them around the playground with devices for their good of their health, right? And it's monstrous, but that's the logic. So the first blockchain baby was born in Tanzania. And I would say people who are in the health space, particularly around maternal health, they are after the children. Like this new synthetic biology program they want the unborn pre-K. These are the transhumanist generation. Like they don't want really old people like me. I'm not coming along with their program. They're probably, I'm going to be done with before long. They want the babies and they want to make money on it too. It's not just about creating a cyborg program, but it's actually how can you both do it and make money off of it. So in Tanzania, they were tracking maternal prenatal healthcare on blockchain and awarding token payments for good behavior to the mothers. But again, a lot of this development aid in Africa is tied in with these big global pharmaceutical companies like Johnson & Johnson. The Robert Wood Johnson's Foundation is a huge player in the space. And again, we know that they are convicted criminals. Like they are convicted criminals of participating in the opioid crisis, they've been found liable around pelvic mesh and around asbestos baby powder. Like these are companies that have terrible track records, and they're also involved in the vaccine space. What if you're getting prenatal care and you are compelled to participate in care that is against your wishes, but you're all being tracked on blockchain as this commodity? So
right. Let me just take a moment here, because we have a few people that are articulating, I think, what for you and I, for example, like you had this quote I wanted to read. My praxis has been to digitally swim in the toxic brew of militarized transnational global capital. It helps me learn the terrain so I can interpret it for others. The toxicity, however, does take a toll. And that's what a few people have been saying, is like, oh my Lord, I need time to digest and integrate and get some kind of antidote. So just taking a moment's pause, how much more is there in the presentation?
Okay,
and then also, because I don't want to rush you, trust me, this is very important to me in the sort of Akashic blockchain of what people need to know now into the future. But can you give some people listening like a sense for what, again, they might be able to do with that information before we go forward, because it's a lot.
It is a lot. So, I mean, to me, it feels imperative to stop the biometric health passports.
Okay.
Because I don't know what happens once they have that. I mean, and again, we're making this up as it goes along. This has never happened a player in this space is IBM, right? And the Hollerith cards were part of the Holocaust and part of apartheid South Africa. So we've kind of seen how this goes. And, that's why I feel like some of it is on a spiritual realm, because if you look at on paper, you would think, my goodness, like the odds don't seem great. Like, and that will eat your soul, I think. But, I don't think that the cosmic universe would want this to happen. And humans are messy. Like, as much as I fight for humans, like a lot of times people really disappoint me, but like they're unpredictable and messy. Like a lot of the people who supported my work in understanding what's happening around COVID were not people I ever expected. And so I think we have to have faith, and we have to be bold. Like, we have to be strong in our beliefs. And I feel like it's about an abolition movement. Like, we need to channel, who are the John Browns, like who are the Harriet Tubmans, who are the William Stills, and channel those ancestors, right? To stand up to this, because it is anti-life, it is fundamental. There's no, like at this point, there's not really a fudging around the middle. Like, you have to know where you stand, and I think we are powerful in that. We far outnumber them. Far outnumber them. If they only knew, like, I mean, in this image here, this is in China, this is IO2 Foundation, and see, they're videoing these families. And like, to me, it's this point of coming together, right? Like, we've been broken apart across nationalism and across partisanship and across every breaking part. We're supposed to, but we are humans. Like, my faith is in moms and grandmoms. Like, in this story they said this social worker is coming in and filming on the tablet this grandmother and the great grandmother for this little baby girl, and her parents are off working in some factory to make probably these stupid devices. And they said, we have to condition these grandmothers to have this tablet so that they're comfortable with all the data, right? But they're these women around the hearth, right? Like, and they may not even know it. Like, I have to believe that if we mobilize people from this space, knowing that we have nothing to fear. I am in solidarity with that great grandmother in China, right? We have so much to bring us together in this moment, and to be right about the world. Like, to me, it actually feels like this tremendous opportunity. And I'm not trying to dismiss it. Like, I mean, I can't. Like, clearly, I can't. I'm supposed to tell people. And not everyone's going to hear it. Not everyone can hear it.
Well, this is good. guidance.
I am telling it and people are finding me. And sometimes I do, like, I have a tiny little blog. I don't have a big space. I don't have a big platform. I'm not writing a book. I don't have any institutional backing. Yeah. It's just me, and I'm a mom, and the people that I'm working with are other moms. And if we knew that their goal was to put babies on blockchain to turn them into commodities, like that seems like if we can figure out how to articulate that to people and say, hell no, you are not putting our children on blockchain, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Fuck that. I mean, like, seriously, we could just, and actually there is a template, so people don't have to just listen to me. I didn't put it in here, but like I collaborated with someone who's connected with the NAACP, who is also a researcher in the space. And she presented at the national meeting last year in Detroit, a resolution opposing linking any public benefit to a blockchain identity. And it was overwhelmingly passed by the membership. The only people who opposed it were people who were tied to an ed tech company in Brooklyn that were looking to data mine special education kids.
Well, Allison, that's an example of where I, co-founded this organization, Stand for Health Freedom, where we would have loved, and we will in the future, just collaborate with grassroots individuals and organizations to go ahead and utilize this massive community online. I mean, I did the calculation with Dr. Mercola one day. We were trying to figure out post-deplatforming on Google, how many people throughout the 250 health brands that we know do we reach with our emails every day? And it was something like 100 to 200 million people. So we can also leverage what's already existing out there through digital advocacy to support actual grassroots movements. And I wouldn't have thought, sovereign identities on the blockchain would be like the front line, but what you just said is very resonant. And I don't think a lot of people realize, like when they hear blockchain, they think, oh yeah, the trillions of dollars flowing into this, hedge against the imploding dollar. They think about other positive aspects. So I think that with your guidance, we'll have a clearer view of how we're going to really meet this tidal wave of draconian energy and really resist. So I do appreciate that answer. I think that's giving us clues as to how to proceed.
We're powerful. Like, they would not try to control us so much if we were not that powerful. We are powerful, and we are powerful and connected. I mean, and not just through the internet, but like I truly feel like I have been given gifts of people in my life through this to lead us in this space. If we weren't meant to engage on this, that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
There's about 1,000 people on live right now from around the world, and many tens of thousands more will be viewing. So clearly, I think.
I mean, there is something that is meant, like the creator does not want this to happen. The creator does not want this to happen. And this is something that will bring people together. And I will say, like, and I know I've bumped up against a lot of people in the blockchain space, and they're like, it's our, this is the answer. And what I'm saying is, it's meant to track digital assets. They would like us under stakeholder capitalism to ask to be a commodity. And once we agree to be their commodity, that means we have to live in a digital world. And MIT, even if you have your data safe, quote unquote private, they have a program called Enigma, because MIT is behind the Digital Currency Initiative, and it's the war machine. They've already developed the capacity to query unencrypted data for impact. So you can keep your little blockchain identity all to yourself. That doesn't mean that MIT isn't going to know you in aggregate and to be able to say, this is this evidence-based medical program, or this is this evidence-based teletherapy. Like, I will say, one of the most shocking things that I did when I was researching someone's LinkedIn profile was finding that the woman who created the crisis text hotline used the data in that to data mine it with machine learning to create customer service support software.
Wow.
And it's called Loris AI, Loris AI. And I think they keep changing up their website. But the last time when I first looked at it, they said, oh, by the way, the Loris is a poisonous lemur. It's almost like they're in your face with it. So if we agree to a blockchain, have a self-sovereign, quote unquote, identity in the stakeholder capitalist system, that means when we are feeling low, that the only thing that we're going to get is a crisis text line knowing that your data is going to be running some corporate call center software.
Yeah. Well, one guidepost then, or a guide reference for folks, is when they say sovereign or green, they actually mean the opposite. It's just embedded within this dynamic right now of deception. So yeah, once again, this context helps us to better understand what's actually happening.
Right. And to unmask it, right? Because they frame it as kind. We only have your best interests at heart, but they don't. So
yes.
Do you mind if I keep...
No, please. No, that's all I needed. Trust me.
So much. And then if I get it out, even if people drop off, if it's recorded, as long as you're fine.
No, that's what this is for. I'm going to go back many times. This is very important. I'm so glad that we are recording it. Just out of curiosity, how many more slides are left?
Oh, we're only a third of the way through.
I know. I thought so. That's no worries. Keep going. I don't want to rush you.
It'll speed up. But part of it is context. Like you have to set the framing and the context at the beginning. So that takes more time. Then you can go faster. But so all of this is about rating Medicaid and Medicare under this premise of value-based payment and social determinants of health tied to pay for success finance. So one of the pilots for prenatal health and home visits, because they've actually set up, and I would encourage if people are working in like the space for like midwives and doulas, like this technological control of reproduction, is very central, and to me feels very centered on like this sacred profane battle, right? Like the sacred feminine, the life, the birth force. They are trying to contain it in these digital platforms and these wearable technologies. South Carolina was the pilot for Pay for Success for the Nurse Family Partnership, I believe it is. Nurse Family Partnership. They are all over the country, Nurse Family Partnership. They put a cost on prenatal health. And please don't get me wrong. I am all about pregnant women having support, pregnant women having access to clearly shelter, food, nutrition, good health care. But it is not about them being a commodity. And that is what is coming. So this was actually backed by Google, this pilot program. This guy here, he was the head of Medicaid in South Carolina at the time. And again, racialized. This stuff is highly racialized. The equations coming for this for education were built in the Harlem Children's Zone by the Robin Hood Foundation. UBI is being piloted in Jackson, Mississippi by the Kellogg Foundation. The fact that this is happening in South Carolina for controlled women, there's a consistency to it. So Pierre Omidyar, who created eBay and has ties to PayPal, his wife Pam has a wearable technology patient compliance software program. And she developed an app called Goal Mama. And I remember being at the University of Pennsylvania, a rollout from some of these impact investors. And I was sort of being a thorn in the side at one of their meetings. And these academics, I said, you're not going to solve poverty with an app in a way that profits Goldman Sachs. You're actually not going to solve poverty with an app. Like these women are not poor because they just need a better targeted daily nudge on the app.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not, and they don't want to believe me, but I think we all can agree that poverty is about wealth, unequal distribution of wealth, not because these are bad women. And if they just were nudged to be better behaved, that they would be okay. Because we know that
in this moment, we have tens of millions of people around the world, formerly of the middle class, who don't have jobs and may never have them again. So no one needs to stretch very far to understand what you're saying on this point.
And this is about consuming content about parenting, right? And imagine like consuming, like being a good, well-behaved mother around both healthcare and other things in your pregnancy. So imagine they're tracking your engagement with this. Now, right now, this is voluntary, right? But at what point does it become, you check into the hospital and they're checking your social credit score to see if you can take your baby home. If you've demonstrated that you will be a good parent under, a good global citizen under the, stakeholder capitalist paradigm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this is a stretch. This is stuff that we really need to talk about because clearly, as I mentioned before, centered on this, if you look at what they did to breaking up indigenous families, right, and Black families, both, right, through enslavement, that was the central feature, was using people's children as weapons against them. So the control of reproduction and maternal health is vital. There are disparities, but the solutions that they are going to offer under this paradigm are not going to be, in my opinion, in the best interests of these women. So Omidyar is, this is a report that he had, I think it was like Little Learners, Big Steps. This is this return on investment. Remember I said 13% was the Heckman equation if you get health impacts built in. So they want to invest in early childhood. It's not because they care about children, it's that they want to manage the children. One of these data points is vocabulary. This is part of the word gap. You'll hear this talking about that poor parents don't talk to their children enough, or they don't talk to them in the right way. It's a word gap. This is a metric. This is how our worlds and social relations get reduced to surveillance metrics to serve these hedge funds. Now, this is super crazy. This looks like a super crazy thing. This is called Lena. Lena is a device. You can see it here. They slip it in a pocket in the child's clothing. Now imagine whatever radiation that's being pulled off of that tube. And then these recordings get turned into data. So they listen to you, the voice analytics, and then you get feedback and coaching to increase how you talk, that you talk the right way to your children. This is data metrics for this. This has nothing to do with this baby. And you know, it probably won't be a white baby to begin with, to fix this. This is not a fix. This is a surveillance device. Well, and Pierre Omidyar is very much connected with the Vatican impact investing conferences, and he's looking for the good ID, because it's the good ID, it's the digital identity, it's the ID 2020 that will allow them to use this data to make bets on this baby and this family.
Well, this is such a great example of a international technocratic system intermediating the most sacred of all relationships, the infant mother dyad. It's just remarkable that that's what an AI is. Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I'm saying. If people actually knew these pieces, no one in their heart, I believe it. I mean, with maybe very few exceptions of crazy sociopaths, would think any of this is okay. Mm-hmm. But and I will say in Philadelphia, like we used to have beautiful theater companies, like small theater groups, and interesting plays. And I think in many respects, a lot of plays that I saw helped me see this. But one of them was called Ideation. And it was a one-act play set in a corporate conference room. And these like McKinsey type of people were given this job to do ideation, to ideate, to come up with brainstorming on how to dispose of all of these bodies. And in the course of, and really they just wanted to get off to their kid's soccer game. And so they're kind of going through the motions, and then they're thinking, is this real? Like, could this be a real thing, or is this a joke? Like, who else is doing it? Do we have all the information? What aren't we being told? And I feel like for so many of the people who are have been raised within this machine and this establishment, like you're afraid to question. You're given a tiny slice of the picture. And if someone tries to pull back and like pull the curtain back wider, like there's a tremendous hesitation, because if that curtain opens up, it's going to change your life in ways that are just almost unimaginable. And so people are holding, and I think that's part of the spell that's being cast. Like people are holding so tightly to keep the curtain closed, because once you open it, it all falls out. Mm-hmm. And it looks like this. This is the 5G tower, the little cells at the end of my block that I'm being bathed with. There's one on either end of my block. I'm in the city block. I'm in a row house. I keep being afraid they're going to put one outside my window. That hasn't happened yet. We need to also, beyond Black and brown people, look at how we manage animals, right? Industrial farming, industrial quote unquote free range livestock management from space. So that is the model. And, one of the things I was really not familiar with, because it wasn't my, I didn't come up through the truth movement, right? I came in through public education activism. Like no one had told me about Operation Paperclip, right? That after the Second World War, that Russia and the US were fighting to pull in the Nazi scientists, right? And that Wernher von Braun ran the NASA, the space program. So once you understand that the global digital jail is run from space, and that we're meant to be the livestock, and that all of the infrastructure and all of the private satellites going up now, the Starlink and all the ones that Bezos and Musk are putting up there right now, that technology was essentially developed by the Nazis with these, military technologies in your neighborhood every 1,000 feet. It's kind of hard to look the other way and think that there's something, that this is all just, something nice that they're doing to help us out. This is just another one of my graphics, again, just to reinforce, you have this incredible maldistribution of wealth. You have all of these poor people. What do you do with all of these poor people? In the impact economy, you find a way to turn poverty into money. They need the liquidity. And that's why you have the stakeholder capitalism. And this is actually crazy. So, Sarah, if you were thinking about being a B Lab person or benefit corporation, registering through them, this is actually their own document from, I think, 2009 of how they represent themselves. And I don't think they meant this as a twisted joke. This is actually, this is their document. It has 16th to 18th century colonial capitalist, 19th century industrial capitalist, 20th century shareholder capitalist, 21st century stakeholder capitalist. They tell you what they are. They just are not hiding it.
Wow.
The other thing I will say, that IRIS is this impact management, the metrics. I do think it's really interesting, the symbolism of the words that they choose. IRIS, a lot of this is going to run on retinal scans. So this choice of IRIS as a word is very significant, I think. And then IRIS is also this personification of the rainbow, which we know is that the Sustainable Development Goals are represented in rainbow colors. And, I think the rainbow is somehow like the connection, the communications of the gods to one another. So again, this is the global impact market.
Well, gin also has meaning as well.
You're right. Oh my gosh. That had not occurred to me before.
Like Nephilim. Wow, crazy.
So these are the hedge fund guys. So this is Paul Tudor Jones. His gala is like the gala that all of the hedge fund people want to attend every year in New York at the Javits Center. He runs Tudor Investments with Ray Dalio. The Connecticut, a lot of these hedge fund billionaires are based in northern New Jersey and Connecticut. He created the Robin Hood Foundation, and in this area called the Harlem Children's Zone, this is Jeffrey Canada. Harlem Children's Zone, the board chair of this is Stanley Druckenmiller. And Jeffrey Canada and Stanley Druckenmiller went to college together at Bowdoin, and they were there at the same time. And Stanley Druckenmiller is George Soros, was one of his fund managers. And in fact, together they shorted the British pound for like billions and billions of dollars in one day. So Stanley Druckenmiller has created Blue Meridian, which is doing a lot of pre-K investing. These are the people who would short an entire national currency are setting up these bond markets in all sorts of things, including your healthcare. And then this is how they represent themselves to their peers as Robin Hood. Oh, and the other thing is he got his start in cotton futures trading. He's from Tennessee. So I do think that there may be some connection there also to Oak Ridge Labs and stuff that's going on in Tennessee. But Tennessee is a center for a lot of this. And the cotton futures trading, again, it's significant. So again, we've heard like in the past week that BlackRock is doing advising on environmental, social governance, green, good investing. This is the shift to stakeholder capitalism. They're saying that they are using all of their assets and they are getting everything lined up. And so I wrote a short piece from one of my blogs, and I don't know if people are familiar with this Twilight Zone episode, but in it, the outer space beings come to Earth and everyone's afraid, and they're like, no, we're just here to serve you. And they give them a book, and they calm the people down. And this woman who's a linguist, and she's there like working really hard to decrypt the language, the alien language of this book. And so that the outer space beings have gotten everybody on their side, and the chosen people are getting back on the spaceship, and like the man that she loves is stepping up on the ramp to get on the airplane, into the spaceship, and she's running like and waving the book, and she says, wait, to serve man. It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. So stakeholder capitalism is not serving man, it's a cookbook. Okay, so they want to purchase population health. This guy, Kindig, David Kindig, he wrote this paper that we're going to purchase population health because this is all going to be framed as fixing health disparities and health inequities. He advanced in his book this healthopolis, right? This goes back, and this is again 20 years. So this is back when they were all setting up the outcomes-based contracting. So Kindig had envisioned that there would be a healthopolis for 2020. Imagine that. So now they're revisiting it. Bloomberg has set up a whole system with his mayors, connected and trained through Harvard Kennedy School, a partnership for healthy cities. And it's important to know that Bloomberg was the ambassador to the World Health Organization, and he was also the ambassador to the UN for climate change. So he's got all his stuff covered. And he was working for a long time in a lot of these spaces around the soda tax, around tobacco, around things that were ostensibly supposed to be healthy, but were going to be tied into these impact markets.
Yep.
Here he's got digital services. He's remaking digital government, both here and in the EU. And in the EU, there's creating the single data market. So these data markets are what's going to run the stakeholder capitalist program. I do want to emphasize, and people may have some thoughts about this. I know I've met some really amazing people who are energy healers. And so I need to have a better understanding. I have the invisible rainbow that I really need to read next. But Bloomberg was trained at Johns Hopkins in electrical engineering. He's an electrical engineer. Okay, that's important. All of this is signals intelligence and managing electricity. So he's a geek, but he's an electrical engineer who leveraged his understanding of electronics to create data that would inform financial markets, that he then leveraged to become mayor and put in policy all of these social impact policies that can now use New York as the center of hedge fund investing to turn the world into this new human tracking, human capital program. It's like layers upon layers, all tied to energy. This is saying, this guy, he's a, former banker at Goldman Sachs. He writes for Bloomberg. He's talking about securitizing people's education debt. I do think that somehow this framing that's going to come out increasingly will be around having health savings accounts, and that will be the impact market. Again, the pay for success is social determinants of health. So something I am in no way saying that there are not incredible disparities, right? Many people there's environmental racism, there's lack of access, economic based on race and class, huge problems. Pay for success is not going to be the fix, because what they are going to do is they can continue to poison our beautiful earth, right? They're not going to fix that because they have profit centers built into, we just saw that with Vilsack, right? There are profit centers being meant into poisoning people and the planet. But then they will compel us through gamification to work in a preventative, quote unquote, healthcare system to manage our individual behaviors, to manage us in economic uncertainty, to say that we are going to prevent bad health, but it's all on us. They're not going to make anything easier. They will just put stumbling blocks in everybody's way. So COVID very much highlighted health equity, and you could hear that in the early narratives, and I'm not disputing. Clearly, the negative impacts on people were against specifically the Navajo Reservation, which has a lot of uranium issues there as well, but also the Black community due to ventilators and incentivizing maltreatment of people that led to people's deaths. So I'm not in any way disputing that there were disparate health impacts that disproportionately impacted Black and brown people. But that narrative is now going to be used to say, look, the comorbidities of these communities because of having living in stressful environments, having living in poison environments, having epigenetic trauma, these comorbidities of asthma, diabetes, heart disease, these are all things that can now be framed as impact markets. So here again, Bloomberg, this was before he's got this American Health Initiative, a healthy future. Here's him with Gabrasius. They've named Johns Hopkins Public Health Institute after him. This is the piece where he's working with Harvard to train all of the leadership people to get everybody on board. Sidewalk Labs in Toronto, that is Google's smart city. So this is the game. The game is, how do you navigate life in a smart city prison? CityBlock is Alphabet's I think it's going to be blockchain health system for wraparound services and preventative care. They frame it as focused on complex urban populations. So you can read between the lines there on how they're framing this. But remember, they also have Nest. They also have all these wearable technologies. So Google really wants it all, right? Like it's not, they drop that don't be evil stuff. I think I have a friend who says it's actually don't be live or don't believe, right? Like we've flipped it around and now we're not living, we're just anti-life. And now when you understand this bigger context, you know why the IMF thinks using your search histories for your credit score is a good idea. Because how you operate in that space is going to depend. Google owns it. Google owns everything.
I was just going to also add, Allison, anyone with a credit score knows that they're already tracking you and they're gambling on your future based on your behavior. So a lot of it's already nascent within the extent system. So a lot of, it's sort of already there.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize too, because I think a lot of times, again, their goal is to have everyone fractured. And I'm saying, y'all, it's all of human life and on behalf of natural beings against AI and the billionaires, right? This isn't like, if we're framing it as it's transnational global capital, in my mind, understanding this is the impact management project, which is the 2,000 largest asset holders in the world. It's capitalism, but ultimately, like when they say, oh, social credit scoring is China. No, it's based on us. Like we've been doing credit scoring of people, very sophisticated levels of credit scoring of people for a very long time. China's gotten really good at mashing it up with the facial recognition. So this is just, again, hitting on, they need the interoperable identity. Bloomberg had funded under the guise of electronic health records for unhoused people, set up with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, a pilot digital identity program on blockchain in Austin. So Austin is a blockchain center. Robert Woods Johnson Foundation is tied to Johnson & Johnson. It's not sophisticated. In this model, it's just, there is a QR code on they give it on, what do you call it? Like when you put a piece of paper, you put plastic over it.
Laminated.
Laminated. Yeah, it's a QR code on it's a laminated card with a QR code. So I think sometimes people, they say, oh, it's a conspiracy because we're not going to shoot you up with a chip. It doesn't have to be a chip right now. Clearly they eventually want it to be some nanotech, but it could be, and there may be nanotech in it. I'm not saying there isn't, but it doesn't have to be. It really can just be a laminated QR code on a card that's holding your health data. And this pilot is already underway. Again, marginalized communities. Who is going to stand up for unhoused people in Austin?
And just to add, we're all self-chipping entities anyway with these smartphones, unless we've gotten off them, which is also a legitimate step that we'll talk about in the future.
Yeah. Well, electronic health records central. I've touched on this before, but the seamless exchange of healthcare data. Okay, seamless exchange. So that was a central part of the Affordable Care Act. Again, Obama's support for the national system of electronic health records. Obama, I mean, this has been going on clearly for decades, but he was really advanced many, many aspects, technological and policy aspects that are going to allow this to move forward. On the side of China, though, I will say, in the gaming concept, in 2016, the Democratic National Convention was in Philadelphia, and I went to a program that was on the future of education, and it was sponsored by the head of Epic Games. So Epic Games is I'm not a gamer, but a very influential gaming company. They have Unreal Engine that's used for other video games. They created Fortnite. It's based in Raleigh-Durham in the Research Triangle, but 40% of their gaming company, which once we understand that the plan is for us to live in a video game, a mixed reality video game, is owned by Tencent, which is Chinese. Okay.
Can I add something? Which is the Gates Foundation is invested in Tencent, and they were a partner in Songbird, which was the only film that was produced in lockdown in LA, which has predictive programming all over it. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so Tencent, they've got the social credit score piece. They have the digital ID card. They have the facial payment, pay with your face, and then they have blockchain. Okay, but it's not just China, because Epic Games is in Raleigh-Durham, and they're creating a lot of the tech for the gaming tech for this game to run. In China, they are using blockchain to track parolees. So people who did you go to your work placement? Were you compliant with your online behavioral health therapy? Are you where you're supposed to be? Are you not where you're not supposed to be? They're tracking you on, again, blockchain. It's not a liberation, it's an incarceration technology. And it's not that it's just China, because the system of IEEE, it's like the International Electronics and Electrical Engineering Association, is based in New York. They helped set this up in Foshan. It's very fluid. There's an incredible amount of fluidity between the Bay Area and Beijing and China. So it's power versus the people. So this is already prototyped. If we're characters in this game, our ability to move about in the environment, because clearly, when you're in a game, there's places you have to attain certain levels to gain access to, is the Common Pass. The Commons Project, again, is Rockefeller and the World Economic Forum. What you're hearing about now is the Airport Pass, right? And they're not telling you about these other projects, which are your pass that will allow you to access education and work. And then this is the biometric sensing pass. And then this is only the 3 that they have on their website. They said they have unlimited amounts of data gathering that they're planning to use data for good. And they have a global board of 60 people, and they're all over the world, the most influential people. Here's the thing about Austin. It's specifically, the digital ID was about healthcare records, and you can see here the QR code. It does not have to be high tech at this point. As long as it can link you through your biometrics back to the database, the actual infrastructure itself doesn't have to be high tech. And we know with QR codes, clearly, how many people outside of, in this country were familiar with the regular use of QR codes up before lockdown, but now we see it all over the world, people having to scan in with the QR codes. So the other piece, this is the history. I just want to say, and this is hard for people on the liberal side. And again, I hear you, I want people to have what they need. I'm not a free market person, because the free market is going to be trading in these commodities, right? We need a new model. But what we need to understand is that in many respects, the social welfare system was structured in a way that was never meant to allow people to get out of it, to escape it, and to keep them under surveillance, especially once globalization kicked in and you had excess labor, right? They needed to put people in circumstances where they could make money off of their suffering, and navigating the game that is the welfare state is very real. And so this was a book that really influenced me a lot. It was called From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime. And it talked about the way in which the war on poverty actually put a lot of policing systems into public housing and the police athletic leagues, and into the social structures in ways that made it a logical extension coming out, that it didn't actually fix the structure of income inequality, but it actually just put the poor under more and more surveillance. So this is a really important book. She's out of Harvard, so I'm sure she's not going to probably tell you the stuff I'm telling you, but this is important context. And then this links back to just something that came out from the Harvard Business Review, I think in April. They're already talking about, the surveillance piece is huge, especially surveillance of marginalized communities, that Macro Eyes was going to use satellite imagery to track with accuracy who will drop out of immunizations. Wow. And this is in Africa. Okay. So this was, I can't remember, the head of Gavi, Seth. So this is pushed in the Harvard Business Review. They're saying, we are going to use data to predict behavior, and we are going to spy on African children from space and make predictions about their health data and their health performance and their health compliance.
Yeah, I'd like to add that.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, in this window, we have a biosecurity global surveillance apparatus that preempts the constitutional protections of any specific nation, state, or jurisdiction under the false auspices of saving lives from infection. So now they literally can spy on anyone, anything on the planet, just so that they can prevent a COVID infection or death, right? So, yeah.
And equitable. You see, here's the operative word, equitable. We need equal access to surveillance. So this is the future of health. I added the dollar signs, but this is from Macro Eyes. This is from their website, right? And it's fascinating how they depict humans. I think that's very significant. That image, right? It's dots, it's dashes, it's data. It's kind of rainbowy. It's multiplicities. it's non-individualized, it's dehumanized, there's no faces, and then it blends into the background. Like to me, and my background is art history, but this visualization says a lot. And healthcare is hard, and they're going to do the data analytics. And what I'm saying is, remember, they're going to make us live in their toxic game. And I'm just sort of touching on the fact that they're saying we're going to manage people, but we're not going to talk about, DuPont poisoning the water. We're not going to talk about, Monsanto poisoning the food. We're not going to talk about, water protectors and in the stands that they've taken. We're really just going to make you sick and then make you into data and gamble on you. So it's signals intelligence. Signals intelligence is about state surveillance, and it is about social control. And this is just one of my little things, but this is early on, I did one about blockchain ID. And so this is the smart city. Like you live on a phone or, eventually maybe a chip. And these are how you resonate with devices, laptops, phones, iPads, smart playgrounds, smart lights, Internet of Things bikes, all of those bike share programs. That is all Internet of Bodies. They want you on that bike so they can tell where you're going and how fast and what your heart rate is. The Fitbits, the Alexas. In our city, we actually had smart benches that were solar chargers for your phone, but they would listen to you in the park. Our park system, we had these. They were called SUFA, and they came out of MIT. I mean, it's like the War Machine, and it was put in not by our park department, but by the public-private partnership. The Conservancy, right? Like the fundraisers, they raise money to put surveillance benches in our park. The easy passes, your smart meters, the QR codes, like ultimately we're all about these barcodes. And I will say, I talk about this a little bit, but my father, like our ticket, like for my family out of sort of, like working class poor to corporate America was that my father worked for Procter & Gamble. And he sold Folgers coffee. It's his whole life. I mean, his whole career, his whole adult life. He did that. But it turns out like right around the time that he retired, the individual who invented the Internet of Things, the barcode and the RFID chip was at Procter & Gamble, and it was scaled through MIT. And now there's 8 of these auto ID labs. So it's to try smart pavement even. We're all being tracked in the game. This signals intelligence informs the surveillance department. So I actually went just to the front, the visitor area of the Applied Physics Lab. The Applied Physics Lab is tied to Johns Hopkins, and they help develop the guided missile systems, but they're also doing social physics. They're predicting society so that they can shape society, and it's part of the overall simulation. And then the social physics, Sandy Pentland out of MIT, that's his focus, right? The nudges, the behavioral economics, all of this data is feeding not only military signals intelligence, but the hedge funds. So this is actually also from Macro Eyes. And they're saying the health data analytics we're getting from space, it really is more like a hedge fund, right? And that health data, we're going to rapidly create new markets and maximize profits in structured data trades that's like a hedge fund. HP gaming, this is at Halite. Two Sigma invented a gaming platform to inform their hedge funds with AI. So we're all feeding the AI. Like right now, I'm guessing the AI is learning a lot. This is Cornell Technion on Roosevelt Island. This is Bloomberg set this up with Google and a number of other investors, including Two Sigma, the hedge fund. They're getting health data analytics and education data analytics, and they have this small data lab that's using your digital dust to make predictions about you. And I found this several years ago, pre-COVID, but one of the programs they were developing was called Pushcart, which was passive data collection about household food consumption, right? So imagine Pushcart being, and it's actually a carrot, right? This is the nudge, the carrot and the rabbit, the Pushcart, and imagine how that's gonna go now with all of our online food ordering services. I keep saying people in single payer, it's when we get single payer, if it happens, it's coming with a Fitbit and a brainwave headband. And these brainwave headbands were developed out of Harvard. Okay, they're using them in China, but not just China. BrainCo was a program with Harvard. So those are the wearable techs. You know, Delaware was a leader in blockchain healthcare pilots. That's all I'm saying, right? And here's Pritzker just the other day, early December, talking about open enrollment, Affordable Care Act. He's funding J.B. Heckman. It's very clear, the writing is on the wall, folks, how this is going to go with the health system and the votes. And people need to say, listen, if we're getting our healthcare, what are the implications for pay for success finance? Deloitte, remember I mentioned about the accountants. Deloitte, this is from several years ago. They're already talking about smart Medicaid. Smart Medicaid tied with health and human service agencies. Because I will say that DataZone and the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust, both of which are embedded in Chan Zuckerberg, feed into something much scarier and much lower profile called the National Interoperability Collaborative that was created by something called Stewards of Change, which is it's a very strange name, Stewards of Change, to choose as a consultancy. And most of it is health data analytics, but actually it also feeds to the National Fusion Centers and the National Council on Crime and Juvenile Delinquency. So it's all about creating those cost offsets. So again, Deloitte is talking about smart Medicaid being linked to social welfare. You're linking your electronic health records to your social services to make these markets possible. This is just, again, reiterating, not making it up, Medicaid, managing the poor with pay for success, value-based purchasing. That's what this is. So these are some of the things: the diabetes, obesity, asthma, heart disease, lead, the home visits. They put these home visit legislations in place over the last 5 to 10 years in many places, and they're putting home-based daycares out of business. Maternal health, food, and mental health. It's all going to be in the game. And these are people can go slower through the slides, but these are, again, asthma. These are just screenshots to show that this is real. I'm not making this up. The Maternal Pay for Success Project, that's the South Carolina one. And a major player in this, and people would not know, right? Like, who thinks that your cable company is setting up the global digital jail, right? Or like your cell phone operator, but it is. And another player in this space is the Entertainment Software Association. So the gaming industry, as we push capitalism into these gamified virtual worlds, the gaming companies are incredibly powerful, and I don't think many people are paying enough attention. So this is one of their conferences where they say the future is gaming, the transformative power of video games as a platform for education, health, and social impact. It's not hidden. They're telling you. They're saying now, I think people seeing that might think that the game means an Xbox on your TV, not that it's Pokemon Go out in the world, but it's Pokemon Go out in the world. And they're planning on using gaming technologies, including behavioral profiling and psychological manipulation in the game environments. Michael Crow is a central feature in this program. He is out of Arizona State University, which they have the Center for Games and Impact. He is the founding board chair of In-Q-Tel, which is the venture capital arm of the CIA. And the In-Q-Tel funded Niantic, which created Pokemon Go.
And they funded Facebook initially. And just for those who are thinking about this in terms of like, the game is set, you jaywalk, the surveillance system, identifies you as violating it, and you lose a credit or some service or entitlement. So you can't really opt out of the system that they're constructing ultimately.
Right. And it's games for impact.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's still a chance, but.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. See, like let's not play their game.
Yeah.
No. Let's not play their game. I think that's the fundamental, but let's stay off blockchain to not play their game. Yeah. But you can see, again, the funders: Gates, National Science, Education Testing, Public Broadcasting. The public broadcasting, y'all, NPR and Sesame Street are not the good guys. I hate to tell you, but I know firsthand. The original public-private partnership with the initial Corporation for Public Broadcasting was funded by Carnegie Corporation, and the developer was the president of MIT at the time. So again, USAID, that's the humanitarian quote-unquote aid, Intel, and various private donors. They're getting us in the game. And Michael Crow has said, 2 presentations to the military that like, we are already cyborgs. He's like, today's generation are already cyborgs. I consider them cyborgs. That's how he views humanity. This is talking a little bit about behavioral economics is central to this. Heckman and Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein are all central in the behavioral economic space. It's the nudge. In the game, remember, they're betting on our compliance or non-compliance, and they're going to try to use nudges to to make us make the choices they want us to make, without us perhaps even knowing it. And that is central. This is the work of this woman, Angela Duckworth, who is a professor at Penn. She's a MacArthur genius. I was really upset about this, seeing this several years ago when I was doing education, and I didn't fully appreciate it. She's part of a program of behavioral health, or not behavioral economics health program at Wharton that's tied to Wharton and the University of Pennsylvania Health System. And she submitted to a competition to the MacArthur Foundation to solve a global problem. They had to do a 90-minute video pitching their proposal to solve a global problem. And her proposal was that we would use technology to make us make good decisions. Now, she was not, ultimately, she made it to the second round, but she wasn't funded by MacArthur. She later was funded by Chan Zuckerberg. Okay, and this video is called Making Behavior Change Stick, and it's all centered on using technology to make behavioral economic changes that are tied to impact markets, and it's tied to education. You can see here at the top, it's tied to financial inclusion, like financial, good behavior with your finances, but then you can see here that these are the partners that she planned to work with around health and fitness. So the behavioral economics piece is very central to the gaming and the hedge funds. And this is again, I'm not a gamer, but my friend Joseph, I said, I need a leaderboard to show like health status, right? Like you've got your common pass and you're on the leaderboard, and like, what does this look like, right? So here's Eric, the unwilling hero. What is his health metrics, right? With the biosensors, what are his points and what are his strengths and abilities? So we're all being pushed into these virtual worlds on leaderboards. And again, the biometric health passports are going to be tracking. Imagine this, your gamified life tied to a health passport. This is just touching again on Niantic. I mean, Niantic straight up says that they're going to come up with an operating system for the world. And a lot of this is the takeover of our governing systems under the framing of open data and accountability and transparency. And that's being run through New York University GovLab and Harvard Kennedy School. And they've, Neil Kleiman at NYU has co-written a book called A New Operating System for Government. So they have to change all of government to run the fourth sector impact markets. And here Niantic is going to set up the operating system based on Pokemon Go and Ingress. So this is Keyhole, satellite surveillance. That's very granular at this point. And that people, I would say most people just don't know it's about the CIA. This is Thaler. Thaler sort of really, he got a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics. This is his actual dissertation, The Value of Saving a Life, a Market Estimate. That's 1974. And this ties into nudges, and this ties into where Duckworth is working at this Center for Health Incentives and Behavioral Economics. What is the value of saving a life? Which again, I will ask people to consider, look up the Zong massacre, because that was driven by insurance markets on enslaved bodies. A ship hit the doldrums and they had insured the enslaved people for, I think, drowning, but not starvation. And they were dehydrating. And so they started throwing the bodies overboard to get the insurance payment. So we have to understand the Zong if we are to understand how behavioral economics fits in with Richard Thaler and his dissertation. Again, once we're in the digital world, we can be managed more efficiently. It's a militarized space. The gamified space is inherently built on military technology and technology that uses very sophisticated entertainment to manage us, to manage our health, to manage our behaviors. And I will say, USC, University of Southern California, there's something called the Institute for Creative Technologies. It actually is a partnership of, like, the founders came out of Disney and the U.S. Army, and they've been working to create synthetic people for like the past 15 years. So all of this has been very long in coming. Again, they want us to be part of this artificial web. Hunger is a part. I'm getting close to the end. We might not have time to go through all the maps, but I'll stop with the hunger. This is a good example. So we know UN Sustainable Development Goal 3 is health. Number 2 is hunger. Number 1 is poverty, right? So there's building, everything builds off of poverty. Here's the iris. the eyeball looking at you, you're reduced to your iris, your retinal scan. These retinal scan payment systems, they've been piloting on Syrian refugees for quite a long time. The Rockefeller Foundation wants to remake the food system. They want to remake it, essentially, I believe, to advance the synthetic biology, to advance us into a transhumanist program, both through injections and through the food that we consume, which we already know GMO foods are making health impacts on human bodies. But that's going to come to another level. And they want to, you see here, maximizing shareholder returns. They want to remake the food system not only to advance transhumanism and cyborgs, but they want to make money on it in the hedge funds. So imagine, hunger is one thing. Under lockdown, this is a framing out of July, an op-ed from an economics writer in Australia, which we know is suffering incredibly under lockdown. And they say, oh, we think you're getting a little pudgy here. We think if people are needing public assistance, they should have to walk for it. And they're connecting right back to Boris Johnson, whose right-hand man, Dominic Cummings, is connected with technological refinements and eugenics. So they're saying, oh, look, we should walk for the dole. And now they're going to be able to track and make sure that you can do that. The food system, they're already talking about putting edible vaccines in the food that we eat. They're talking about printing food with 3D printers, right? And they will probably have precision food for you. What kind of goo goes in your tube for your genomics? They're talking about local food as food in freight containers, run on phones. There's no farmers in these freight containers. And then they have larger versions that are warehouses run by robots. Their local farmers are being taken out of the equation. And that is why what is so powerful, what is happening in India right now, is the farmers standing by the millions for life, not just for human life, but for the life of nature and the land. Because this is an abomination, what they're talking about. And then you would control it from your phone. They will do social prescribing. This is Michael Bloomberg's program. London, I think, is the model for a lot of this, social prescribing. We care about your nutrition. We care about you being the best human being. We want you to have good health behaviors. It's being built through the NHS. And I think if you understand that this is connected to the London School of Economics, which was connected to the Fabian Society, and the Fabian Society was steeped in eugenics. And an early thought leader that was connected with the Fabian Society is Michael Young. He was the first social entrepreneur in the UK. He was the thought leader for the Labour Party in the UK, and he essentially helped scale a lot of the social safety net programs, including the NHS. So it, in some ways, is very logical that this hijacking that is coming through the NHS, and it's coming through like a eugenics-laced paternalism of telling people that they are going to have to do what they're told. But it's not for ultimately for their well-being. It's for the hedge fund markets. This is the connecting capabilities of the Internet of Things. I think this is out of a university in the UK, and they're talking about tracking the social prescriptions in healthcare. They're going to track you, and they're going to give you a social prescription. That's the path. Remember back to the very beginning, the spider web and the cliff walk. The social prescription is your cliff walk, and you've got to walk it, and the IoT is going to track that. Increasingly, it's in mixed reality. So they want to take our own senses away from us. And you can even see in COVID, they're talking about, you're going to lose your sense of smell. You're going to lose your sense of taste. And I'm not really clear on the impacts of what the 5G might be doing to that. But they clearly want us to contain us in these headsets. Look at this small child. They're being trained to be an Amazon warehouse worker. They don't want you to know how the systems work. They just want you to show up to have an AI tell you which button to push, because next week you'll push a different button. You're never meant to know how the machine works. You're going to be captured by the Internet of Bodies. And again, I talk about nosedive. This is sort of a take on this Black Mirror episode, but that's it's going to run on your phone. And that's why the low-cost internet, like low-cost phones in the global South are such a huge thing right now. And that's the Obama phones that were managing people in poverty. That's why all the poor people needed a phone, because it was their surveillance device. This is really important, these DNA nudge bands. Imperial College London, the gentleman who made the terrible prediction, Neil Ferguson, at the beginning that had the horrific numbers, he was based out of there. The Imperial College London business side runs social impact bonds. So it's not a disinterest. The medical side is running the finance side. Imperial College London has a business division, and their business division helped create, actually it was their division, helped create spin-off company called the DNA Nudge Band. It was wearable technology where you're supposed to scan your nutrition against your DNA. And people say, I can't imagine who would ever do that. I would never. That's crazy. Well, you would if you're poor and the only food that you get to eat is the food you scan with the nudge band. So the NHS has actually purchased almost 6 million nudge kits tied to COVID. Okay, so they're getting, I've always felt that this testing protocol is a DNA harvest. Okay, so they've got a financial interest in impact investing. They've got a financial interest in wearable technology. Now, this is a program that hasn't yet scaled. It is a thought experiment. The state of Illinois, again, commodities futures. The state of Illinois and Pritzker, and that's where Heckman is. They did a whole blockchain task force report in 2018 that came out, and one of their thought experiments was, how do we manage food stamps on blockchain and incentivize the right behavior? That you have the digital identity set up. And again, I'm thinking that is going to come with the biometric health passports, the Common Pass. Your benefits that you get, and this is like the Fed dollars that we're talking about, live in a wallet, okay? This is food, but this could be anything. This could be your choice of healthcare option, your choice of education option, your choice of clothing option. Like everything is going to have a prescribed choice. The way you use your money is dictated and engineered through these systems. And again, this is a blockchain smart contracting system. If you buy the apple, you will get an incentive payment into your wallet. And if you buy the hamburger, you won't. Now, people who are not familiar with like structural inequality might look at that and say, well, I don't see what the problem is. I mean, they're getting a little bit more. I mean, isn't that good? I mean, shouldn't we want people to eat apples? The thing is, if you're someone who has had to navigate one of these structures, you will realize that soon enough, the benefit wallet will be shrunk, the amount that goes in there, to the fact that you can only ever get to the end of the month if you always make the right choice. They're not going to build any lean. It's going to be lean. You're always going to have to make the right choice. You're going to go hungry that last week, right? And then, what is the right choice? If you're a poor person, are they going to make you choose the vaccine-laced tomato for your genomics because you're possibly pre-diabetic?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a choice. It's not going to be a choice that people have. And it's also not looking at the fact that people live in food deserts, people are working 3 jobs, people may be living out of the back of their car, right?
If I could add from your previous presentation for people to connect to this larger idea, is with programmable money, what they can do is exert control on an infinitesimal level in real time. So they can alter the money so that it can only pay for one specific service or type of food in real time, depending on your behavior, your credit score, your social credit score. So that's also one of the dark sides of the cryptocurrency movement that's figuring into Allison's presentation.
Yeah, and they can stop you. I mean, that's the other thing, because before even COVID happened, I remembered there was someone in high-level government in Australia who said, we should be able to stop welfare payments to people who go to environmental protests. Well, how would they do that? Well, if it's all on blockchain, they can turn off the SIM card. If you're on a government phone and all of your access to things you need to live on digitally on your phone, they can use sniffer drones over groups or crowds, and they can turn that off remotely. So again, they're putting us in a Skinner box, this operant conditioning. This is when I say we need to pull all the people out of the boxes. They want us to live like pigeons in their boxes, and we're not. And this is, I will say, there was a, and there are these stories that are supposed to be heartwarming, right? Look, this community school model. We have a food pantry here, and look, and if you look at the food, like clearly it has to be food that is not going to, it's non-perishable, but a lot of it is highly processed food. We have a food pantry. Well, everybody gets access to the food pantry to a certain point, but you can earn more points if you do good deeds. If you're struggling to make ends meet, maybe your high school kid, through acting out good behaviors in the classroom, can maybe earn you an extra box of macaroni. And this is from December 10th. This is not old. This is priming us for what is coming. Behave or you starve. So, I don't really probably have a good amount of time to go through these maps because I know I've just gone on almost 3 hours, but like I do these maps just so you know, anyone's like, we'll put the slides up. You can follow through the link here and it will go to the interactive version. Each of these dots you can click on and is a database record. Each line shows the relationship. This one that I made is about testimony about digital currency and Fed dollars. And it's very much tied in with the hedge funds, specifically John Arnold of Enron and Michael Milken, okay, and the savings and loan. So these two individuals who we know how things turned out with them before, Milken and Arnold are both closely embedded in the pay for success impact space. So, and then I will say up here, there's, this is their Accenture and Gary Glickman. Accenture is very central to this. And Gary Glickman worked for Accenture. He's helped set up Pay for Success and his focus was smart cards. So again, digital payment systems. Started out originally smart cards with a chip, but now it's on phones. So this Accenture is very much built into this model and they are part of the Digital Dollar Foundation. So they need everybody to get on these digital dollars, but they won't ultimately be dollars. It will be script in the company store, in the prison store. This is a map that I did about Michael Bloomberg showing the social prescribing, that the City of London is a test bed for this, and that this is the elements over here of the Imperial College London and how their social impact bond finance played into how they're talking about the pandemic. And then this one, I would love to talk about this one like a little bit more at some point, but this actually is about the wearable health tech. They've actually set up the first health impact bond and it's in Sweden, right? So we're all supposed to want to be like Sweden and oh, that was a setup because we don't want to be like Sweden because Sweden is running the fourth industrial revolution and they're already all chipped over there. So the first diabetes health intervention, the diabetes health impact bond is coming out of Sweden, but it's in partnership with Ronald Cohen and social finance in the UK and in Israel. And they are collaborating in the Bay Area on smart textiles, woven, Internet of Things woven into textiles, including a smart shirt. And actually, I am going to just, if you don't mind, I want to just open this one real quick because there's just a good thing. And I'm going to have to change over my, stop this screen and get a new screen share.
Sure. And I'm going to let everyone know we're going to end on a really positive note. So yes. The people that are here still, Allison, there's 840 live. I mean, you deserve great accolades for your participation and it'll be worth. Yeah.
But there's no leaderboard. It's just karmic.
Exactly.
No stars. We're giving no gold stars. Yeah, so this is a good map. This is the one I've been working on this week, and I'm always making these big maps. So, okay, so here's the diabetes health impact bond, right? It's linked through Pay for Success. There are whole things in obesity prevention. That's the soda tax and the calorie counts. These are linked to the Imperial College London, their R&D around the DNA nudge bans, right? And here they are with their policy innovation and the impact bonds and the social prescribing. And here's London and tracking people through the wearable technology. Here's Neil Ferguson over here who screwed everything up for everybody. The diabetes, clearly it's about managing nutrition. So this planetary diet program, and I'm really encouraging people who are on the wellness side to think about like just prescribing people's health choices. Cause I know people have like a lot of very specific moral and health ideas about food, but like, what is it going to take if someone is prescribing you 3D printed food? The control of diet is really important. And that's coming through the Lancet and Wellcome Trust. And Wellcome Trust is like working with Gates, working on the metrics, working on all of the vaccine platforms. So they want you to eat and they want to manage you with the vaccines. And then, so we'll just go over here. This health movement, it's part of this larger program that is connected with a variety of entities, some universities in I think, Bulgaria. There's one in England, the city of Rotterdam, Catalonia, because it's interesting. This is another deep state thing. Barcelona is the smart city, the radical rebel city, supposedly. But this business school is out of Navarre. And It's participating in this IESE business school. It's the business school of Opus Dei. And Larry Summers, who's part of this Lancet Commission on Investing in Health, these health investments, he's chairing the tech advisory board of Banco Santander, which is one of the largest investments of Opus Dei. And these are like the self-flagellating monks, like from the Dan Brown movies. Mm-hmm. And then the other woman connected to Banco Santander, which is a Spanish bank, but also very big in the EU. I think it's one of the largest banks in the EU. She's advising them on blockchain, this Blythe Masters. She pioneered credit default swaps.
Wow.
And then you've got these utility settlement coin projects. So like when people ask me what happens with the securitization, I can't quite say because they haven't pulled it off yet. But when you see things like Larry Summers and Banco Santander and the credit default swap lady and the deep state Vatican all embedded in a diabetes health impact bond, it tells you some stuff, right? So over here, I will just say that this health movement project, one of the investors is this Research Institutes of Sweden. It's a public-private partnership in Sweden. Again, they're very high-tech, 4IR, very green, quote unquote green. They have a partnership in this smart textile company, and they were going to do the smart shirt. They developed a smart shirt for COVID and for disabled people. And it's a shirt that would capture your health data, and it could even tell when you coughed. It's like a spy shirt. And they were partnering with the Stanford University Hospital System, with Stanford University. This woman, Zinan Bao, is a professor at Stanford in electrical and bioengineering. She founded the Wearable Electronics Lab. And if you understand that Stanford created, with Wharton, I mean, they're both together, they collaborate a lot, impact investing through this Center on Philanthropy and Civil Society and the Center for Social Innovation. Their graduate business school is also doing a behavioral lab, real-time analysis about investments and value chains, and persuasive technology. Within this context, right? So what does the smart shirt mean when you've got technologies influencing your behavior, taking real-time data, informing hedge funds, creating value chain? But, oh yes, it's for your own good. It's for your health. We care. We really do. And then Stanford University has very close ties with Chan Zuckerberg, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. These are the data zone, the data analytics warehouses that I was talking about. Data Zone, Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust, and the National Interoperability Collaborative, that people really need to spend some time on this. And I could unpack a whole program just on them. But that the medical program is creating whole industries in wearable tech that are going to essentially imprison us, not just body. And I didn't even really get a good chance to talk about this other than Loris AI, but they want our minds. They actually want our minds, because a lot of these metrics are based on measurable behavior change. And in virtual worlds, the behaviors they can change are our mental states.
Yes.
But, okay. But I think clearly there is a lot going on here, and there are lots of places this thing can break down.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of places that this could break down.
Yes. Wow.
So I am here because I'm a mom. I have no special expertise in this. And people say, Alice has been doing it for decades. I have not been doing it for decades. I started doing the school stuff in 2013. I started my blog and really digging in 2016. Anyone can play this role. I am no hero. I am no special person. We all have our path in this. And my path is to I talked in the beginning about John Trudell, Robin Wall Kimmerer. I would say if this gets you really down, get the book, Braiding Sweetgrass. I tell everyone, that is the good medicine. Her teachings, she's a professor of forestry in the Sunni system, and she's citizen Potawatomi Nation. And she has an amazing, anti-capitalist, maternal worldview of things, and it will help you get through this. And she has said, we have to carry the sparks. That's our thing. We carry the sparks, and we don't know if the spark we carry will be the bonfire. It might not even be in our lifetime, but this is put on our hearts to do this. And I truly believe that in the larger cosmic balance, that this world is not meant to be taken over by some kind of crazy sentient AI hive mind. I don't believe that. But we can't slack off and just say it's not happening, or it probably won't happen. We actually have to stand in our power and I've had some wonderful conversations on my page. I would encourage you to, with Yojita Mystery and Deep D Dot and Sandy Adams, about really knowing your heart and knowing you're not alone. Because I found amazing, beautiful people in this. I mean, y'all, I'm assuming some of y'all are out there. Like, we're finding each other. We're building it, but we have to build it.
Well, you're such an inspiration, because, like, you know, what you have outlined in the past almost 3 hours, you know, you'd almost need some kind of AI singularity, machine learning, quantum computing to understand. And you're one mom, which, by the way, when you present your credentials on your blog, that to me was so compelling. Like, that is the ultimate credential at this point. You know, for me, it is father of, you know, 4 daughters, basically. And I mean, that's why you're so compelling to me, because people during the stream, I had to interrupt a couple of times. Some people were feeling sick. It's not unlike what some experience in plant medicine or some deep kind of midlife crisis or dark night of the souls. When you start to really grasp what you're referring to, this planetary leviathan that seems hard, you know, bent on destroying our sovereignty and our lives and our freedoms and happiness, yeah, it just makes you feel powerless. And yet here you are, you know, with a sort of lightheartedness, almost fairy-like energy, leading us through this realm. And you're coming through so powerfully. You've been very inspired by Indigenous people. In fact, when I asked you, you know, like, how can people support your work? You don't take any kind of donations or support, but you did have someone that you said that you sometimes refer people to, and they can make a donation. So if you want to tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, like I said, on this path, I've been given the gift of experiences, right, and people. And so I spent some time on Lakota land this summer, and I was working on building this garden. And the circumstance, it didn't actually, sometimes you go and you don't, the thing you think you're there to, actually it's fascinating, because my friend who's the farmer, he's like, Allison, because I was like, I want to do this right. Like, this feels really important, because they'd actually closed their borders, and it was part of their sovereignty movement to make their own decisions about their own health practices. And they were concerned about food issues. And they had developed some folks were doing mutual aid, and they had this poultry project to get hens, to get chicken coops into people who are on the lands. And then they were like, well, can we do this garden? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know a little bit about gardening. I'll come out. Like, if you want me to come, I will come. And so I had felt this tremendous pressure. Like, what happens if all the supply chains get cut off, and like, we need food, right? Like, and I don't really feel too capable, but I'll try, right? Like, we'll show up and try. And I was telling my friend Chris, who farms, and he actually has amazing, you know, the other flip side is that I actually work at a botanic garden, and being on land is what grounds me. And I normally am a computer person. I'm not a gardener person, but I interact with people, and I'm on this amazing land in the city of Philadelphia, Lenape land. And my friend said, you might just go and learn the land. Don't try to impose. You might not even be going to do the thing you think you're going for. Just be open. Be patient. Don't bully, because, you know, me, I mean, you can probably sense, like, I try to rush into things, and it's like, just sit with it, you know? Mm-hmm. And because of the quarantine stuff, I essentially lived in a tent for 6 weeks, just mostly with this land, this beautiful prairie, like big skies. And I take a lot of inspiration. I say too, like the plowshares movement and the Barragans. I have a friend that I organize with here, and she's 90. She did federal time standing against Tomahawk missiles with the Barragans, and Sister Margaret. And she's a scholar of the Desert Fathers. She's amazing, but she lives in a trailer in North Philadelphia helping people with crack addiction. And her thing is the Desert Fathers. And I went to see her before I left, and I said, I think this prairie, it might be my desert. Like, I feel like I need to know more about how you did that. Mm-hmm. And but I had nature. I had the spiders, right? Like, early on, I talked about these amazing spiders. And so the community, I thought that it was going to happen. It didn't happen the way I thought. But I ended up connecting towards the end of my stay with a woman who had spent 20 years in environmental nonprofits, and realized that it was not, you know, she was disillusioned. And so she had come back, and she was actually gardening. And the neighbor who lived next door, she's like, you have to come see the garden. And I'm like, yes, great. I'd love to get out of here. Like, let me see the garden. And so we were talking about, hugelculture beds. Like, I really wanted a hugelculture bed, like these raised beds, but she had a hugelculture bed, and we like really connected. And she's a water walker, and she prays for the water, and she was trained by Sharon Day. And she told me about that. And the garden where I'm at is on water. It's on the Schuylkill River. It's a tidal river. And so she shared with me a water ceremony, and it was very powerful. And I don't say this, and I'm saying that I think she would appreciate that. I had this experience, and she said, we need to pray. And I said, I don't know. And she said, and you should take medicine from the land with you. And I was like, I don't want to be, I'm so worried about cultural appropriation. I'm like, I don't want to be I'm not aspiring to take on something that I'm not. And she said, no, this is big. We all have to pray. The Creator wants us to pray.
Wow.
And you need to smudge every day. That's what she said. She said, you need to smudge every day. So I smudged. I ran downstairs and smudged before I did. So hopefully the good intention of this carries forth this medicine from Lakota land. But, there were these 2 eagles that flew over after the ceremony. And we ended up walking out into the spit of land on the Minnesota and into this little gravel spit. And there was an eagle feather at the end. Wow. And I can't explain how that happened. I mean, I'm not saying this is about me, but I think we all probably will have these things happen if we open to the journey that we need to take. And not everybody can come. And that's sad. It's the people closest to me are not coming. And I can't change people. What you can do is speak from the heart, put your intentions, and then hope that the intercessors carry it out. Wow. And anyway, so this person is on, so I think mutual aid is the way, not nonprofits, no offense, but is not impact investing. And anyway, she is on Venmo, and it's at Chaz, CHAS Jewett, JEWETT -1.
I got it.
At Chaz Jewett -1 at Venmo. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
without the parenthesis there, I gotta take that out.
Yeah, not the quote line, right. But yeah. So, and she keeps chickens, and she grows a garden, and she's trying to figure out. She said, "I'd like to have a lamb, but I don't want to go to the bank. Like, how do we do this?" And so, this thing that we have to build, it has to be built together, and that's what she gifted me with those teachings, and now I'm trying to gift them to you. And I think we ripple out. It's energy. If we keep the high energy, if we come from a place of gratitude every day, well, it'll happen. And we don't know how. We don't know how it's going to happen. I was always the person who had the plan. Oh, what do I have to do? What grades do I have to get? What's the next thing? Out the window.
I mean, in my own experience and process, I have to acknowledge that there's been a divine intelligence that has architected the life that I have had with at least my present partner, Kelly, of the past 7 years. I mean, the most improbable events made it possible for us to meet and then live our life together. And that's just one little example of where, right, when you plug into non-AI, non-Facebook, non-social media, you might see some serendipity or synchronicity. And it's exactly those energies that are being co-opted through surveillance capitalism and the weaponization of all this data capture. They figured it out. It's like a dark spell. But when you really do live life and you take your bare feet on the ground and you start connecting with people, trading, your gifts, sharing, that is when these prayers come to, have these great impacts. So, you're such a great ambassador of this approach. And I believe that you're providing us the answer by sharing that very much.
So, but yeah. I'm grateful. I don't seem to be able to do this under 3 hours.
Oh, no, it's great. No, it's very helpful.
But it's the structure. Once you understand, and it takes a while, but once you actually have a schema, you can start plugging things in. You can see things on the news and go, oh, it fits in this. This is how it fulfills this narrative. It's almost like reimagining capitalism for this virtual world. And it's the why. I think that was my frustration before with some other people who have bigger platforms, is that they would talk about the parts, but it wasn't synthetic, and it left out the hedge funds, like the militarized hedge funds, because it's empire, right? This is empire. It's AI. It's settler colonialism. And I'm not saying this in a dismissive way or just to check a box that I have that. It truly is. It is settler colonialism. It's AI, but we're going to win.
Can you say settler colonialism?
Settler colonialism. So the idea of a colony, but where those who come into the space want to erase the original beings.
I see.
So like the United States is a settler colonial. The attempt was to erase indigenous people, either physically through genocide or through cultural erasure. Like we are taking your space and you cannot be here, as opposed to a colony where they might utilize the people as part of the colonial project. Settler states are, you're out. And like if the earth becomes a colony of AI, or the hive mind, then we as natural humans are gone.
So it's a next layer iteration where now even the US hegemony nation state is being settled by this transnational. Yes. So it's sort of transmogrified to the next iteration, and it's planetary, and we're subject.
I think it feels that way. I mean, I was never a faithy person, no offense, but like this came to me. Like people have been connected to me for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel that way. So as far then as empowering people moving forward, I think you've already given them some clues. First of all, the wrench in the gears is your website. So that's where we can follow you, your YouTube page. Do you have a newsletter list?
I do. If people want to email me through my blog, I have to figure out a better thing because like it's actually on Google. I'm kind of embarrassed. People are like, what are you? And I'm like, I'm sorry.
I haven't found one.
Like when I was a mom, like I'm still a mom, but like I was doing this 4 years ago. I got to up my game.
But look, Proton Mail is CERN developed and they're connected.
I know. Well, see, that's the thing. If you read Surveillance Valley, it's like all compromised. So either, I could just go sit in a closet, but I'm not. So.
Well, one idea I was going to actually propose to you is Telegram for now is at least, I guess, part of not part of the WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram complex. So that's where we have a channel, we can distribute content. Okay. But it would be nice to find you somewhere where we can connect outside of those platforms.
Maybe I think my phone, like, wouldn't it take Telegram? Like, I have a vintage. My husband's like, your phone is vintage.
You can use desktop. That's what I use. Yeah, I don't do my phone with it hardly.
Oh, you can put it on your computer.
Yeah, okay. That's why I like
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay, well, I'm learning.
Buy or sell.
I mean, I have a YouTube channel. I mean, unfortunately, the last month, I haven't written as much because honestly, I've had like 3 podcasts a week. And like you could see, it's like 100. Like I made this from scratch for you today, from us yesterday.
You're extremely prolific. Your articles alone, I encourage everyone to go read them because it's just so succinct and just so helpful. So there's
a backlog. There's a lot. I mean, the recent ones I've done this week, I did a 4-hour podcast about Israel. Social finance in Israel, because that's a huge piece with Shaidan on. So that was important. And then I did one with a friend specifically around for the Black community, like about what the implications were for human capital, like with that lens. So there's different ones that I'm talking to different people, but the reality is this giant thing, like wherever you are in it, like it speaks to you. It speaks to your condition, unless you're running it.
Beautiful. Well, for those two who have been following Stand for Health Freedom, what we intend to do is if you're feeling like you need something to do in terms of concrete steps in the future, I would love to get guidance from you, Allison, as far as what we could focus on in terms of impacting certain,
I would love to take it to the next level. I guess at this point, I probably honestly, this might be the launch point of enough people understanding it that we can, because it felt like an educational process. Like you can't actually come up with an effective strategy until a certain group of people understand what the actual nature is of the threat.
Exactly.
But we weren't there yet. People weren't taking it to that next level. Once we understand it as militarized hedge funds on blockchain in smart cities, then we know what to do, right? And then it's about the crafting of the language. I mean, if you tell someone like, oh, by the way, this is what this is, I think we're going to start cracking things open.
Yeah. No, I agree. In fact, I would love the opportunity, let's say in a month or so, once it's clearer and I'm going to help to disseminate more of this information, we could focus a session too on maybe even more targeted solutions you might advocate for.
Yeah.
So that
and part of it too is like, I want to empower the communities that are the ones who are going to be on city block, right? Like the people with epigenetic trauma, because to me, it would probably not be right for me given to say that I have the answer, because that isn't my life. Like I
Yeah.
actually want to listen to the people who are the ones who are
Yeah.
living it, because they have the right information on how to respond.
Wonderful. Yeah, maybe you could even refer us to someone that you think we should highlight and amplify
Yeah.
the message. But either way, thank you so much
right.
for your dedication. This will be definitely up for replay. And if you are open to it, someone asked if you would share the presentation PowerPoint.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, all of this is for us.
Great.
This is communal building. Like this is knowledge sharing. I'm so disillusioned with all of like academia and everything. It's like, we should have information to share with one another to advance the cause of justice. So yeah.
Beautiful. So we'll have that in the show notes with links, and then we'll provide that as well for download. Thank you so much, Allison, for your work.
All right.
And
Thank
we
you.
encourage everyone to follow you and be part of what you're doing. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.